It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions.
Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Wednesday, February 18th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. As I told you yesterday, we're going to be focusing on, in part on the universal flu shot that is going forward, that I will show you is connected back to this administration and the U.S. government at large in clear ways, but also through sort of what I argue are, sort of a shell game kind of dynamic, which I think is a lot of what happens today in regard to the funding, because trust me, the government knows we're paying attention, at least more than we have before. But I'm going to overlap that with a point today in regard to Bill HR 7006, which I'll point out the Substack that I saw it first on. Not familiar with them, but I want to give them a shout out because I thought they did really good work on this. And it's a quick Substack breaking down very concerning developments from the Trump administration, and it has to do with exactly what the title says today. To put it as simply as possible, the bill, which has not, this so far has only been approved in the House, which again, it shows you the Republican support for something that will probably shock you if you haven't read the title. And it's far more than just GAVI, the idea of a bill that is bypassing HHS and I guess arguably RFK Jr. I say that because he's part of this administration, but if there is a division on this point, which is, I think a lot of people still believe, I don't know where I stand on my opinion of RFK Jr.'s real opinion and who was driving his actions. But if there is a division amongst them between pro-vaccine, pro-mRNA, what it seems to suggest is that Trump's administration is using this to circumvent HHS, using the State Department to fund GAVI, and many other things around this conversation in particular, but also things that probably also would frustrate Republicans, like immigration assistance and refugee assistance, or funding AIDS research in Africa, or AIDS contraception in Africa, all the things that we just talked about, and rightly so, people going, why are Democrats so ridiculous in funding these things? Well, guess what? As I was telling you then, it was not just Democrats. Many of those things, including climate change discussion points, are still being funded right now through this administration. Like I've shown that probably 6 different times in the show. Never breaks through because we're not allowed to break through. But nonetheless, the point is important to see that this shell game, I mean, this part of it wouldn't even be called that because it seems to be public, but a way to kind of create, to allow the same things to continue that the driving force actually wants. Left-right paradigm used to distract people as usual. But also on top of that, a great article coming out from Unlimited Hangout about Robert Kadlec, who has now been welcomed back into the Trump administration for the Department of War, who is a central player in the biosecurity, biomanipulation apparatus, and was doing so during Trump's first administration as a part of COVID-19. I don't know how any of these moves individually could be supported by Republicans who claim to support the things they say they're supporting, let alone all of them alongside each other. It's over the top to me. All of this tends to be today, but it's still important we cover it objectively as possible. But more than those, and even in that bill in particular, there's funding. I mean, I think 36 mentions of Israel, by the way, in this bill. I don't even need to explain why that's important and why it should bother you. But on top of that, all sorts of other funding discussions that we'll get into. But I think what's important to start with, again, is some updates that carry over from yesterday's show that I think that I want you to see, in particular to an article that Kevork Almacian put out, which I published today because he did get back to me and he said that was something he wants to support. And, I've known him for a while. I really do support his work. I think he does a great job. And that overlaps with Israel, as we were saying, in regard to this hidden network discussion, at least in part that we can see, and a couple other points about Epstein that I didn't want to miss before we bring into what we started with there. So let's get into the opening points here that I think are relevant. Yesterday's show, the empire above Epstein and the tightening grip of its enforcement arm. Now, that first part of the title comes from the article that I read from Kevork Almacian of Syrian Analysis. And so here's the show we went into. I'll point to his work in 1 second just to give you to show you where we posted it. Before that, just to carry over from this show. On this kind of general point, the empire from above and the tightening grip of its enforcement, there's a part that I saw right after the show that I knew you guys would be interested in. This whole first segment kind of relates to this idea, but True Stream Media put this out, and I just saw this right after yesterday's show. This should have been at the end of the show, would have perfectly tied it all together, and that's this point. The 10th Amendment Center put this post out saying the DHS itself, the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is unconstitutional. I agree, and shouldn't exist. I agree. Any constitutional functions in this department could easily go back to where they were before the surveillance monster was created in 2002 during the emergency powers hysteria that was 9/11. Now, this is coming from Raw Alert saying the Department of Homeland Security has sent legal requests to Google, Reddit, Meta, Discord for names and email addresses and telephone numbers of people who criticize ICE online, as we reported yesterday. So first of all, this is it's like the fire in a theater point for free speech. It's something that people have somehow absorbed as just like what we all agree on. But do we? And is that actually logical, or it's not? It contradicts your right to free speech in its every possible way, because that does include you lying, by the way. It doesn't, but it also includes the possibility for you to say that and be wrong and not being held. It's a way the government was always using this to say, okay, well, yes, you have the right to say what you want, except in this little circumstance. And that little circumstance has blossomed into almost all the conversation. That's how that works. So the point in an abstract way is about that manipulation. And so in this sense, about like things that we know are inherent that we are convinced aren't or shouldn't be. The DHS or the Department of Bureau of Land Management, for example, is unconstitutional if you understand the core and not some overlap of national security or because of X, Y, and Z, which you can always do. Give it core point to the Constitution. And so the bottom line is that something like the Department of Homeland Security, that most Americans would they would look at you like you were a lunatic if you even bring this up, because it's not it's not something that we allow most people, or the government, the structure allows people to think about. It's like saying, should government exist? People go, what are you even talking about? Even though it's something we should genuinely be asking ourselves today. So government, yes, but that's way further down the line. Just realize that this kind of all-encompassing government surveillance apparatus for your safety has never been about that. So we need to start questioning these, go even further, not just should they have this power, but should this exist? And let's go even further beyond that. I just think that's really important to think about. But on that point from yesterday about the hidden network and the real power of everything, as they said, this shouldn't exist. True Stream Media adds the national emergency powers declared in response to 9/11 are still active. You guys know, most of you probably know this, and have been renewed every single year, ever since. Left or right, Trump or Biden, we have been living under national emergency for 25 years straight. We don't talk about that because we pretend now this is just the new normal, right? It's really important to think about. And if you watch yesterday's show, you'll know how much that this perfectly would have brought together everything at the end. Keeping all this in mind, though, this was the post that Kevork originally posted on his Substack. Really hope you'll read it again. I'm not going to read it again because it's longer. It's just so worth your time. It really just discusses the reality that people that you would have never expected, the average person who barely pays attention to politics, are suddenly going, is this how things should work? Is there something other than that president and that government actually making these decisions? And you'd be surprised how far this is actually reaching. Epstein files, the whole thing. And it is at least opening that door to people's mind, to opening your mind rather to that possibility that we could choose another path, and that there are in fact other things guiding how the world functions today, and it's not your vote, or at least people are asking these questions. And my God, that is important to happen today. So on that note, though, think here that same mindset, just keeping this. I thought this was a funny post. If you remember this from the Truman Show, think about this in this kind of analogy, right? So it says they have figured out their world is an illusion. Their perception is engineered. Their leaders are puppets. Their entertainment is a distraction. Their labor is meaningless. But will they do anything about it? And that's the picture of when, if you've seen the Truman Show, where he's like, oh, okay, he's starting to figure things out. Well, let's just kind of wait. Let's do our best to see if we can keep him in line. Let's see if we can add a couple more things and throw a couple more things in his way. Maybe he'll get distracted enough to just play it out. Really think about that, which is where we are right now, where people are going, whoa, hold on a minute. That's not right. I can see the strings. There's the curtain right there. Look at the man behind the curtain. And they're going, God, I hope they just stop pointing. Don't stop pointing. Now, on the point of, the network behind everything, I really hope there's plenty of different perspectives out there. And I try to include alternatives to mine, as often as I think you guys tell me, I think I do it quite often. But the point is that I very clearly see this, whether Zionism or Israel or just what all of the US and Israel and the UK and what they're doing in the world represent, as kind of the central issue to all of this. Doesn't mean it's the only thing. It doesn't mean I couldn't be wrong. I'm saying all of that because I think it's important to recognize that this is what I think, but please just consider the larger point about something else other than what we're being shown and given is actually what's happening. But, don't take just my word for it. But the evidence here stands out pretty striking to me in regard to the Israel influence on our government. Now, all that said, how very clearly I think this is obvious. I'm saying that to be objective. And it's, it's hard when, it's like you can have something like, hypothetically, if we literally caught Netanyahu, what's a good analogy? Just something that you couldn't ignore, literally Trump was doing what he was told from Netanyahu and it was absolutely red-handed caught. And then they go, well, and try to make up a narrative. And you're going, but wait a minute, it's right. You can see it. Are we not looking at the same thing? This is where all this is today. Israel is absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, influencing, I'll keep it there just for make it easy, our policy in this country. And if you can't even acknowledge that, then you have lost your way. Israel is publicly, admittedly doing that. My point is it's going well beyond just influencing and going to the point of absolute control. But we can prove the first part of that. So it's important to think about how clear this is and where we are. Now, there's a quick little segment here overlapping with Huckabee and Tucker that just stood out to me that I wanted to include based on that hidden hand sort of network guiding what we're dealing with. As Jeff writes, we have a government, but it's not ours. Chris Menahan posted this clip. Now I'm just going to read it because it's not that long. It's 5 minutes, but I'd rather just read it quickly to give you the sentiment. It says, in a wild scene at a town hall event in Israel, by the way, because Huckabee's there again, just like Lindsey Graham was there again, like the 7th time, because that's totally normal. It's not at all, by the way. And in Israel, again, an angry Israeli school, and by the way, it's a different point since he's the ambassador, but nonetheless, it applies to our entire government. An angry Israeli scolds Huckabee because he says, quote, his friend Tucker Carlson wants to strip U.S. citizenship from dual citizen Israeli Americans who fought in the IDF, which would include his own son. By the way, that's a genocidal action that the entirety of the international community has deemed such. So if you're in the IDF and you fought during the genocide, then now you have things to answer for. Yeah, that's just a statement of fact. That's not opinion. That's where the world is. So it's funny that people are still having a hard time, wrapping their mind around what it means to participate in a military force that's openly, publicly, proudly committing genocide. But it says these dual citizens fought in the Israeli army to defend America and Israel, which is not even remotely what was actually happening. In most cases, not even to defend Israel, if you understand what we're talking about. But it says, but now The Hague is looking for them. They are not traitors to America, as they've been called publicly on television, but politicians and your friend Tucker who say they should be stripped of their American citizenship immediately. This guy is just angry if you listen to it. Huckabee takes it lying down, the Post writes, and assures him that the U.S. is doing everything it can to neuter the ICC, that's a direct quote, and the ICJ to make it impossible, as he said, for them to prosecute those wanted for war crimes because they know similar charges could be brought against Trump and Rubio. That's what he's writing, but I agree, and U.S. officials in the future, which, by the way, there's interesting overlaps to this very point in the bill about saying no funding will be allowed to go here if we support the ICC against Israel. But America first, though, right, guys? He says the Trump admin is discussing serious sanctions being placed on anyone or any country who participate in what the entirety of the world is already acknowledging is happening. How do you even misunderstand that? Every day you get these individual points. That doesn't mean you can prove the ins and outs of how it all functions, but if you have an example where the entirety of the international community, and I'm talking about at this point, even the UK has been pointing and making suggestive, like people within their government, let's say, have called it genocide. It's become the outside of Israel and people that they outright control, hint, hint, saying that's not true. There is no genocide. And then you got Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir and the rest stand up and proudly say how they're going to, Amalek, no stone on a stone, kill everybody, everything, even the goat. But no, not a genocide. Now starve them to death. Now bomb them while they're intense. It's an absurdity we're living through. But if we know that that's what's being seen by all of the leading factors, even their own human rights groups, and then Trump still goes, that's not happening. I don't know how else you can even understand that point. What a perfect encapsulation for our special relationship, it says. Now here, oops. So keeping this in mind on Tucker Carlson, right? So that was the real point. Just wanted you to get the conversation. This guy's out there angry. How dare you be a part of the United States while Tucker Carlson says something he thinks? That's really what he's saying, by the way. And so this happened. This was posted this morning. It took place either the day before or the day before that, and ultimately was about Tucker Carlson. So Tucker Carlson, which is being reported today, said he and his staff were detained in Israel following an interview with Mike Huckabee. Well, how interesting is that? Israeli officials confiscated his passport and took his executive producer into an interrogation room. The officials demanded to know what they spoke to Mike Huckabee about. It was bizarre. We're now out of the country, Tucker said. Okay, I must just be a coincidence, right? Well, Dominic Michael Trippi points out, Trump has now told Tucker Carlson to, quote, turn down the temperature on GOP rift over Israel. Carlson now currently visiting Israel per the Jerusalem Post. Now, technically, that should have been the one before because he's now back. But think about this. Think of the timing of all of this, where Trump's going, whoa, stop. Hey, tone down all that free speech, Tucker Carlson, because it's uncomfortable for our special relationship. I mean, we have to be people who can support this don't have principles, unless you just believe this is what things should be like. That's not what you guys say out loud, so I find that hard to believe. So realize, here's Jerusalem Post, Trump behind Carlson's Israel visit to reduce heat in conservative anti-Semitism debate. Trump sends a journalist to Israel to get taught why he should think things differently, and then ultimately gets detained by Israel because Mike Huckabee. I can't prove that interaction with Huckabee about Tucker Carlson was why that happened. But come on, there's something swirling around this, and whatever the driving force is this what America First looks like? Are you going to stand by your American journalist who's detained illegally by a foreign government because he said things about them? Or are you going to side with your special relationship and call that America First? Or any part of this is just not what, if you're a Republican, you need. I don't even need to say that anymore, quite frankly, because I think most Republicans are very, very, very uncomfortable with everything that's happening. I'm seeing it every single day, everyone I talk to. And Geopolitics reports it reports that Eric Trump's investing in low-cost per-kill drone company that's created by Israel, or rather an Israeli company, which if you understand the way they work, it's the same thing. And I don't mean that as a hyperbolic point. Quite literally, they create companies as X in military to promote the Israeli military and intelligence agendas. They've publicly made this clear in like 15 different interviews. But it's racist when you point it out, though. And I could play that clip yet again on 60 Minutes where they say we create fake companies to affect the supply chain, but I'm still racist when I say it, though, because that's how perfectly accurate all this is today. Realize, as they write, the U.S. is depraved, and the president's son is taking an Israeli company public that advertises low cost per kill. Now, so many things you could bring into this. My direction, outside of the absurdity of that in every possible way with the world, with what we're living through, that you're talking about an Israeli company, a country, a government, an intelligence apparatus that has been continually, right up until moments ago, caught spying on Americans, caught spying on the White House. And the son of the president is going to work with an Israeli company tied to intelligence, because it is, though, not an opinion, directly tied to Israeli intelligence. Unit 82. It's a joke, isn't it? Backed by Trump's son, in case you were thinking we only go off a tweet, which we never, ever, 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 ever do, but we always show what we see first, and it happens to be a lot of the flow through this platform. Backed by Trump's son, Israeli-founded AI drone startup plans to go public on NASDAQ. So the Trump family, while he's in the presidency, is rolling out an Israeli intelligence drone company. And we're rolling it out as they're the ones producing. I have to laugh at this point, guys. Genuinely. Now, don't forget, this is from, we pointed this back, I believe it was right after this, sometime in September. This is from 2025, the gray zone. Charlie Kirk refused Netanyahu funding offer. We covered all that extensively. You remember this. This is a good one to brush up on if you forgot how clear it was that Charlie Kirk was becoming alarmingly aware of the Zionism problem in this country and the push to bomb Iran. And that's why all of a sudden everybody turned on him and Trump got mad at him. And all of a sudden the Zionist funders started pushing him away. And if you understand the way this went, clearly they were extremely unhappy and extremely worried about what he was doing. And then completely unconnected. He later died right after that. You can decide how that worked out. A Trump insider and longtime friend of Charlie Kirk tells the Gray Zone how the assassinated conservative leader's turning point on Israeli influence provoked a private backlash from Netanyahu's allies that left him angry and afraid. Now, there's so much in this article that's worth your time. The point I want to reiterate, don't forget, remember, this is also Tucker at Turning Point, where he talked about all this, and it made everyone freaked out. And, half the time I feel like this stuff is coordinated. I mean, you should consider that. But it said, according to Kirk's longtime friend, Kirk's resentment of Netanyahu and the Israel lobby, that's Zionism, so we understand it, was spreading within Trump's inner circle. So on top of everything else, it wasn't just the awareness within the Turning Point community, which is that cat's out of the bag about what Israel's doing to this country and Zionism. It's also about the fact that within Trump's inner circle, this mindset was beginning to blossom. I mean, if you understand the actual network we're discussing that's above the nation state conversation, read Whitney's books, you'll understand that this represented a blossoming awareness to like the kryptonite of what this was. So if you wanted to try to wrap your mind around why hypothetically this might have been done to silence Charlie Kirk, there's your answer. It says, in fact, they said the president himself was terrified of Netanyahu's wrath, which he has essentially admitted, not stating it like that, but more than once that's come out. I mean, there was a recent post we were just talking about, but in any case, the point is, and feared the consequences of defying him. That's Trump and Netanyahu, mind you. During the past year, the Trump insider was told by contacts in the White House that the Secret Service had caught Israeli government personnel placing electric devices on its emergency response vehicles on two separate occasions. Now, that's a report from somebody that we can't verify, but let's realize we already know this has been going on. This is, I guess I had this out of order. Israel accused of planting mysterious spy devices in the White House. Guys, that was 2020 or 2019. Funny how during Trump's administration, but let's be clear, it's completely it's not partisan. It was, I guarantee, happening in every other administration. My point is, for whatever reason, it seems to be to a degree that's almost impossible to miss during Trump's administration. But I think that kind of makes sense. I think so anyway. But so both times. So on top of all that, of his son working with a company that's going to be doing the same things to them, or all the Palantirs, all the surveillance and everything right now, Israel just literally is like, you might as well, I don't even know how to make this sound the right way. With all the surveillance and Israel's investment and what they're doing, I mean, it might as well just be some kind of, I don't know. So the point is, Israel has access to all of information. I was trying to make it sound in a funny way, but the bottom line is they have access to AI, the partnership, all of our biometrics, all of our personal data. I mean, the data that goes beyond what we're saying online, the data, like the hard, cold, reactionary data of what we do and what we spend money on and what our medical decisions are, all of it. Again, I've said that so many times and I feel like it still doesn't sink in for people. Like, it's not hyperbolic. That's the truth. With what they're doing in the world and how they're coming after Americans for opinions, that's got to be insanely alarming. I mean, it is. But the point, where was I on this? So, the idea being that they are putting spy devices all over the place. On top of that, let's not forget the interesting point that overlaps with that, which is that Trump was given a special pager gift from Netanyahu. Trump received morbid gift from Israel's prime minister. That was the pager attack where they killed mostly women and children. And yet the entirety of the Western apparatus was like, what a savvy act. Oh, how look how smart they were to kill all those women and children who had nothing to do with what's going on, or let pagers circulate a civilian population for 5 years and act like that wasn't complete terrorism. Again, it shows you beyond a question that the media was willing to lie about that, as they then clutch their pearls at a hypothetical allegation about Russia. It's just, you can't miss this stuff. That's what it is. Remember, this is in Trump's office, by the way. You don't think that's listening to Trump every single day? I bet you that's something they probably even know of. That's just all my opinion. Now, as even Ron Paul says, why is a U.S. senator from South Carolina going to Israel every 2 weeks? That's Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham said in a speech from Israel that if Iran ends up hitting U.S. troops in the region, it's worth the risk of attempting regime change. They're clearly working for another power. Ron Paul and plenty of others are calling this out and have been for a while, in fact. Top of that, drop site news, the Israeli government installed and maintained security system at Epstein apartment. We may go through this more in depth in a future show, but the point was just to connect this to Epstein. Security equipment and alarms were installed by the Israeli government at a notorious Manhattan residence, in the United States, frequented by Ehud Barak, a former prime minister now. And there's so it has to show you, and I always want to go through like all the same clips because maybe you are new and haven't seen them, but from Wilkerson and the Pentagon and all the same stuff. It's so many examples that this is not just some kind of side small thing. This is being allowed. And I'm talking about the government overlap, the connection to Trump or to the inner circle of Palantir or the Silicon Valley or Tech, every part of what we're dealing with, every single part of this administration, but also others. But it's important because we're here now. From Lutnick to Gates to everybody tied to this administration are directly implicated in all of this. And now they're trying to tell you to move on. So Derek put out an excellent article that's relevant for today. Les Wexner's very bad week. Billionaire faced to testify about Epstein and OSU sexual abuse scandal. So I want to read you a couple parts of this. Then we're going to get into an Epstein connection and finish with the two main parts we discussed. Now think about trying to tell us all that there's nothing here, that we need to move on. It's all conspiracy. There's nothing actionable. And yet there's people already being arrested in other countries. There's people who have been major resignations, which is not enough for me, but at least it's something. And on top of that, you now have Wexner being deposed and Jim Jordan apparently being subpoenaed as well. Doesn't get as much attention, but interesting. The point is that's how are you going to pretend that means there's nothing there? I want to show you some points as we go through this. Even like for example, even on InfoWars, you have Harrison Smith making points that I think are okay, that's a good point. Then at the same time, though, pulling punches where it matters about Trump. Because if anyone out there right now is pretending like there's nothing to see about Trump as he tells you I'm completely exonerated, they're lying to you or they're stupid, because it's very clear that, and we've proven at least two of them have not been investigated. The one I'm talking about in regard to the court affidavits signed under threat of perjury by multiple people that talks about Trump raping Trump, and multiple others. And I've never claimed that was absolute proof. It's simply an allegation, but it's signed in court, meaning they could have gone to jail for it. And as far as I can tell, it was never investigated. We have the Zorro Ranch point. Technically that one's more about Epstein, but there's many of these in regard to things you can prove they have not investigated, which opens up the question to everything. If they never followed up on these major claims, why would we think they followed up on the ones about Trump raping a 13-year-old or whatever else? The question is, or the point is, we need these things to be proven. And if we can already catch them in lies, then it's pretty clear they're covering something up. We'll come back to that, though. The point here is that there's clearly something going on well beyond just a bunch of old tips that they researched and found out were nothing, and now everyone's jumping at shadows. That's not what's happening. I think that's the way they set this up to look. As we talked about, what they've been doing all this time was carefully creating this kind of subjective illusion, but they clearly also screwed up because they're morons, apparently, and didn't redact that or forgot this or included that on accident, and it is blowing up in their face. But I'm convinced this was about trying to create this to let people they have a low opinion of us, all of us. They think we're all what they've created as this illusion, the dumb conspiracy theorists in our mother's basements or whatever, right? So even though they made that up knowing they were trying to suppress people like us, as I keep showing, it's like become the way they see, the lower rung people, I think. And so my point is they then engage with us like that's what we are. So they throw this low-hanging fruit and expect all of us to go, oh, well, only the people that you typically do that in the mainstream alternative did that, so you tricked your own people. I mean, the reality clearly is that there is something going on here, and they wanted you to think there wasn't. And I think that's gone. The question is what Trump does next. I mean, we're going to get to that in his special meetings about he's trying desperately to act like this is all beyond him. It's not. So back to Wexner. American billionaire Les Wexner testifies today, which I believe is either already done or somewhere in the middle, on his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and faces deposition in Ohio State University sexual abuse lawsuit, which goes back before this. And this guy, I mean, it's like a lot of these people, like Luke Bradell before, in the past when he was still around in the conversation. The point is that there was a lot flying around from, all sorts of, or even better yet, David Hamblin from Derek's discussion. The evidence is I've never even seen a case that's so from family members, from, people that have followed it up and backed it up in other police investigations, and yet still it just gets pushed away like it's completely subjective. It's what they're doing with all this today. So this and the Ohio State conversation and all the other parts of it have been there, and people have chosen to ignore it. Now, Wexner is the founder of retail giant L Brands Incorporated, now known as, and think about this, with what these people are being implicated with, or all the things Epstein's tied to, or Trump and his beauty pageants. Like, it's weird to me. Wexner L Brands, also known as Bath and Body Works, former owner of Victoria's Secret, Abercrombie and Fitch, Lane Bryant, the Limited, like trying to draw in like this teen pubescent, like just weird, right? Like, I mean, that's what most of those are sort of known for, at least some of them anyway. It's just kind of creepy to think about these people getting involved in these kind of level of business and the people, the models they worked with. It's, unnerving. Wexner was originally slated to testify on Wednesday at 10 a.m. before the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform at the Rayburn House office building on the Capitol Hill in Washington. However, in recent days, because he's apparently an elitist, or what they call an elite, it was reported that members of Congress would now travel to New Albany, Ohio, apparently, to depose Wexner about his connections to Epstein. The change was first reported by the Dispatch. A congressional spokesperson declined to answer questions from the Dispatch regarding why not travel to D.C. While Wexner's relationship with Epstein has been extensively documented, Wexner, his wife Abigail, and the Wexner Foundation have previously claimed Epstein had no contact with the foundation staff after September 2007. However, in December, the Last American Vagabond reported that Epstein's leaked Yahoo emails show he was regularly consulted for approval and advice on financial transactions even after he was exposed. Why doesn't that change anything? Lutnick, I never did that. Oops, yes, I did. I was lying. No big deal. Let's all move forward. Elon Musk, I never gave him a tour of the facility. Oh, yep, I did. I was lying. Or every other part of this. Now, you can still argue that doesn't prove they raped children or committed a crime, but it shows you they've been desperately lying to you. Same thing with Trump and all of this. You guys, you can act all day. It's embarrassing for you, but you can act all day long like he's so transparent and he did it. But to do that, you have to ignore the last 6 months of just desperate effort to try not to let this happen. See, an honest person is not going to go, oh, see how he tried not to let him out, but then eventually got forced to let him out, and now he did, and so we can go, he did it. No. We did it, or Massey did it, or whatever else. They did everything they could to not let it happen. Or at least that's what it appears to be. So in this case, Wexner is one of them. Lied, got caught, nothing happens. On February 11th, 2026, Representative Massey questioned U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi on why the DOJ had redacted Wexner's name in at least one of the files. Now remember, the important point here, and it's so same thing. They set this up so they would have their talking point, where she goes, well, it's only 1 out of 250. Come on, man, you're just making a big nothing out of it. Well, no, it was the only one that mentioned him as a co-conspirator in the ones that they censored. That's the point. So the rest, it's like Wexner on an email and talking about, well, we're going to meet up. Here's one where they go, this is a co-conspirator in the case of these sexual traffic crimes. And his name is there. So for her to act like that's the same, it's equivalent, it either, again, shows you how stupid she is or how dishonest she is. You can decide. So they covered it up. Got caught in real time, and it didn't even blip. Didn't even shift. And it says, Massey also asked why Wexner was not prosecuted, despite some documents labeling him as a co-conspirator. At what point did the FBI and DOJ decide that Les Wexner is not a co-conspirator, he asks, because our Epstein Files Transparency Act requires you to release the internal decision about whether to prosecute him or not. And it's not in the files. It's not in the files for any of these other men. On top of that, by the way, which again, we're now, weeks past it? Nothing has happened, which continues to make me feel like all this is a big show, is the fact that they've been caught withholding their conversations. Bondi and Kash Patel and others. That was absolutely part of the act. It's right in there as he's citing for this case. Because in this case, it cites they are required to include their deliberations about these decisions. But in the same way, it's listed that they're required to include, which is kind of the same point, their conversations. There's not a single one in there. That's a provable reality, guys, because they had to have done, but they're not, and they're lying. They got caught. No one even cared. I don't even see if somebody should be up there going, this is right now a provable reality of a crime. They did this. We can prove it. Somebody do something. Who knows? Maybe it'll happen down the line. Maybe it's too much going on. But I'm just so exhausted by how often we see things left and right. No one's ever held accountable. Who's been arrested for Epstein and January 6th and social security numbers and whatever you want to go back as far as you want to go back for, or Trump, for example, or anybody. You get a lot of action, a lot of movement and claims and court processes that nothing ultimately happens. You could make that of what you will. It is a fact. And it continues at the bottom. Epstein continued, you and I, and this is Epstein writing to Wexner, you and I had, quote, gang stuff. Whatever that means. I mean, it's pretty clear what it means, but what does he mean it as, right? For over 15 years, they had gang stuff. And it says a great deal of it that she was aware of. I had no intention of divulging any confidence of ours, no matter what accusation she made. And she made quite a few. Yeah, sure sounds like they didn't really know each other, right? Gang stuff for 15 years, a great deal of it. That's from somebody telling you that they didn't have conversation. I mean, these people are covering up their crimes. And by the way, to jump to the end, he came out today going, I was conned by Epstein. I was tricked. And that's probably going to fly because people who are around him holding him accountable are probably also in those files. Wexner is a prominent donor to Israeli causes, by the way, and has numerous connections to powerful Israelis and Jewish financiers. It is these connections that some researchers believe may be another source of Jeffrey Epstein's potential relationships with intelligence networks. Oh, that's right. And I want to read the bottom line part, or the bottom part of this is Wexner's Israeli and potential mafia connections. Now, Whitney's written a lot about the Megagroup and the bigger connections to mafia connections, the Israeli government connections, Jewish elitist connections. And it's important to understand that, which if you want more on that in particular, there's links right here, but Whitney's work is powerful. The links to most of them right here, you can check them out, but go to the Limited Hangout. There's lots of it on it. Now, it's continuing. Wexner is considered to be one of the most prominent Jewish philanthropists. One of these efforts included organizing what was sometimes known as the Study Group, but more commonly known as the Megagroup. The Wall Street Journal reported in 1998 that the Megagroup was a group of, this is a quote, a group of elite Jewish philanthropists that was, quote, formed in 1991 and developed as an effort to conduct a high-minded philanthropic discussion about the pressing issues of the Jewish people. The Megagroup has been accused of being a front for Israeli intelligence. Surprise, surprise. The relationship between Epstein and Wexner has been explored extensively, both in Whitney Webb's One Nation Under Blackmail and the mainstream press. In 1986, Epstein was introduced to Wexner by a Robert Meister, an insurance executive who provided insurance for Wexner's clothing company, The Limited. It was Meister's wife, Wendy, who introduced Wes Wexner to his future wife, Abigail Koppler. Koppler was a young Israeli-American attorney with her own connections to the state of Israel. Her father, Yehuda Koppel, was a former commander in a special operations unit of the Haganah. Now, I'm not going to go into depth, but that is alarming when you understand what they're responsible for, what that connects to. I mean, and it is, as he writes, the main Zionist paramilitary organization, comprised of various militias that united behind the ostensible cause of Zionism, establishing a Jewish homeland. Ostensible meaning that's not what it actually is, but that's what they claim. And there's a video in there you can watch. It's one of the good ones I think are important. I'll actually include it for you. It's a longer one though. It's 7 minutes. And the title of the video is This is Zionism. And it's a rabbi telling you exactly what Zionism is. And it's not what they're saying. I mean, who knows? Maybe we can play it at the end if we've got time. Let's see. So, the Haganah, I mean, here's a good example. In the beginning of the post-October 7th conversation, remember that elderly, actually, I think I might be able to get it right here. Hold on. Yeah, right here. Perfect. I'm surprised it still pops up. This guy right here, this elderly guy. See that guy? These, where he basically, to do it really quickly, he basically said, kill them all. So right here, he says, every Jew with a weapon should go and kill them all. If you're an Arab, a neighbor, don't wait. Go to his home and shoot him. That was promoted by the Israeli military, guys. And he was driven out there to speak to the IDF. He is a representation of the Haganah, Lehi, origin points of these groups, guys. That's why they brought him out. Disgusting. And as Dan writes, Ezra Yachin was a member of the Lehi, the Zionist terrorist group that twice attempted to ally with Nazi Germany. Very easy to look up. And sought to found a copycat fascist state. In January 1941, Vice Admiral Ralph von der Marwitz, the German naval attaché in Turkey, filed a report conveying an offer to Lehi to, quote, actively take part in the war on Germany's side in return for German support. I mean, you could look this up on Wikipedia for crying out loud, and he has it right here from Haaretz. It's amazing how much people don't know. Zionist militia's effort to recruit Nazis and fight against British are revealed. That's Haaretz, the leading Israeli newspaper. The point in saying all of this is that the group that he's connected to through her is the most alarming aspect, or one of them. Look, feel free to look into the Haganah and what they're responsible for. Now, it says the Haganah would ultimately be dissolved in 1948 and become the official army of the state of Israel. That's exactly the point. Yehuda Koppel was a key player in the founding of Israel's military intelligence network. Dropsite News reports that in his diary, David Ben-Gurion, Israel's founding father, who, as I understand it, was also a non-secular borderline atheist, notes that Koppel serves in SHAI or Shai Haganah's intelligence arm and the processor to Israel's Central Military Intelligence Directorate, Amman. In another example of the extensive relationship between Epstein and Les Wexner, it was Epstein who drafted the prenuptial agreement for Les and Abigail ahead of their marriage in 1993. But we didn't know each other. Rumors of mafia connections have also hung over Wexner's head for 2 decades. The rumors stem from the 1985 murder of attorney Arthur Shapiro. The murder was described as a mob-style slaying and immediately set off an investigation by the Columbus Police Department. The day after Shapiro's body was found, the Columbus Dispatch reported that he had been under investigation by the IRS. The dispatch quoted unnamed sources as saying Shapiro had not filed an income tax in 7 years and that federal prosecutors were preparing to take the case to the grand jury. The murder remains unsolved to this very day. The main suspect was a man named Barry Kessler. He was found guilty in at least one other murder for hire plot and sentenced to death, but never admitted to the killing of Arthur Shapiro. By 1991, the Columbus Police Department's Organized Crime Bureau had researched and written a report on the Shapiro murder. The report, titled Shapiro's Homicide Investigation, Analysis, and Hypothesis, was not initially made public, but later became known after it was revealed that Columbus Police Chief James G. Jackson had ordered its destruction. Jackson was temporarily suspended for his actions. Despite the efforts to destroy the so-called Shapiro file, the independent media outlet, the Columbus Free Press, released it in full, linked right there, in late 1990s. Though the report was described as having unsubstantiated allegations, it specifically names Les Wexner and his businesses as having relationships with individuals believed to be associated with organized crime families. The report notes that Arthur Shapiro had been a partner in the law firm of Schwartz, Shapiro, Kellerman, Warren, which represented Wexner's company, The Limited, and that prior to his death, Arthur Shapiro managed this account for the law firm. Wexner also had several other connections with individuals linked to organized crime families. The report concludes, thus, it can be determined that Les Wexner, through The Limited, is associated with at least 2 organized crime figures who are associated with the Pittsburgh crime family. They also state from the predicate facts presented, it appears that Les Wexner had established contact with associates reputed to be organized crime figures, one who was a major investment partner and another was using the Limited headquarters as a mailing address. It's not known whether there are other such figures among Wexner's associates, but it can be hypothesized that the Genovese LaRocca crime families might consider Wexner a friend. The report argues Shapiro may have had incriminating information on a number of powerful individuals and might have been forced to answer questions in his impending grand jury hearing. Les Wexner has repeatedly denied any knowledge of the Shapiro murder. Now, if you understand, like, for example, what Whitney highlights in her books, there's an undeniable overlap with the mob scene at this time with a Jewish mob element, which then overlaps directly with the Israel connection and all the rest we're talking about. So it's important to understand that that is a relevant part to this connection, which does tie back to this larger conversation, especially knowing that his wife, set up by Epstein, was essentially connected right back to the Israeli government. Now, the update, Wexner's official statement to the House Committee on Oversight, it links there for the full statement, never saw or heard about Epstein being in the company of a minor girl. To the contrary, he led me to believe he was in a serious long-term relationship with 2 women. And, and basically, I was conned was the central point going around today. So to me, I visited his island only once. I don't know how much it can be taken from somebody who's been accused of this much, you can see is involved with a lot, to come out now of all times, after lying about even knowing him and connecting to him, or for the most part, now coming out and going, okay, fine, I was tricked. It's like, well, okay, it's a little late for that, but here's the post if you want to see it for yourself. So Wexner is tied into all of this, which ties directly to, through all of the same network we're discussing. Clearly, Epstein was a central part of this, but it's not Epstein that was the one controlling this. That's the important part. He was a piece in this game. I'll include this for you. So, on the Epstein points that connect to all of this in general, here is, Representative Dave Min coming out of the Wexner hearing and announcing something that actually surprised me too.
Very frustrating the fact that there are no Republicans here today. I wish there were Republicans because sex trafficking should not be a D versus R issue. It should be a bipartisan issue. Everybody should be invested in finding the truth right now. And the fact that we've had so little cooperation from the Republicans on the House Oversight Committee, that the DOJ has actively tried to obstruct this investigation, that is shameful, and it will go down as a permanent mark on the records of people like Pam Bondi and Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend for 1 second that I believe that he's genuine. I mean, it could be just as likely as anything else. I mean, maybe he's not a part, but the point is that people like this from the left-right paradigm will come out when it's in their interest and go, they did the bad thing, and just as likely are involved. My point is just consider that. Don't blindly assume it. Don't deny it, but consider it because it's certainly possible with how deep this goes. Nonetheless, that all aside, I'm actually kind of surprised. I mean, I don't know if it's why it would be required or even expected that they would all flock to this deposition, but that did kind of become the expectation, and Massey and the rest aren't there. So you can take that for take it for, what you want to take it for, but it's interesting. But as it plays out, it's what follows that makes the most impact to me, right? Being there and saying this out loud, if followed by nothing, means pretty much nothing, right? But if you see action continue, then it will mean more. But for example, if Massey and the rest come around and go after Wexner or whatever else, then it becomes sort of irrelevant whether they were there at the hearing. But it's worth noting to see what comes next, right? Because, it could imply that they don't really care the way they claim they do, right? And there's a lot of us worried about this from an all of government perspective, which we should. It's what we've seen in pretty much every example in our history, like of the United States. Like this continually is shown to us. And like these big examples throughout our existence where you have these moments and you look back and you find that there was far more involvement, or that they weren't really, that were being played. There's a political manipulation or a psychological operation or a false flag, and whatever we deal with, guys, it's very, very rampant in our history. Now, Gunther Eagleman, of course, post Jim Jordan just confirmed that the DOJ is zeroing in on more Minnesota fraud. Funny timing for that, huh? Well, wait a minute. I thought you guys were telling us before that it was all absolute and it was there. Like, what's been happening over the last couple months? Now you're zeroing in? What's the evidence? What are we talking about? Did Nick Shirley find out? No, he just asked things in front of a camera in front of a door, and everyone, oh my God, it's everywhere. Even though, again, there was crime, there was fraud, and I'll make that point after this clip. I just think it's interesting of all of this for these people who are now acting like Epstein. Who? What do you mean? Gunther doesn't even know who he is anymore, right? Is now going, look over there, look over there. Now remember, Jim Jordan was subpoenaed in this conversation with Les Wexner. So I just kind of put that out there and saying maybe this is why he's trying to draw attention to this. Either way, here's what he said.
Describing would be a crime. But we're not hearing about people, getting arrested and all of this. So you're building the case. Next steps. Right.
Just to start out, except that's what's supposedly already been going on this whole time. So now starting today, we're building the case. Okay, what's been going on this whole time? Let's remember, guys, this case goes back to the Biden administration and before. And here's what he says next, and I'll make this point.
Yeah, I think so. And understand, there have already been like 60-some people indicted. Some have already been charged and convicted, are in jail waiting for their sentence. So I know there's like a few folks with that Feeding Our Future program and some others who are in that situation. Mm-hmm. So it is happening, but we need more focus. And I think
it is happening. Oh, you mean happened in the past sense? You mean Jim Jordan? You mean under Biden's administration? Yes, because it's easy to prove, and I already talked about this. Now, what he just did right there was not by accident. That was clearly, it's believed that we're arresting people right now. That was a very dishonest way to frame that, because all the 74, if I remember correctly, were during Biden's administration. Now, I'm not saying that's a Biden good, them bad. It's just a fact. The point is that if you're going to try to make a case about who's doing something and who's not, you have to be acknowledging the facts, which are 74 people, if I remember correctly, it's off the top of my head, indicted, many of them arrested and actually charged with those crimes during Biden's administration, specifically around fraud in this exact conversation. And so how in the world can they make it about them covering this up when what happens is now we have Nick Shirley having a weird video in front of a daycare going, this proves everything, and it never did. No one's ever really proven what they were talking about. Again, not to say there's not fraud in that exact way. It just means that whatever they did with that weird little Nick Shirley thing was trying to rehash this story that was already ongoing, that had already been engaged with, as if it was new. And it worked for a lot of very simple-minded people. And they all rushed out there and made this big case. And at the end of the day, who have they arrested? Ask Grok if you want. The last time I checked, there hasn't been anybody in this new part of it. They reference the old ones and act like we're ongoing. It's a game. And this is, I mean, I want crime to be, I mean, if somebody is in fact defrauding Americans, which it is happening in plenty of ways on all sides of our paradigm, then they should be held accountable for it. But if all they're doing is pointing to something to keep you focusing on something that never comes to pass, at some point you got to be able to stand back and go, okay, but how about something happens? They do this and they go, oh, we're going to go after Pelosi. Obama's going down. And then you look over there and you miss the thing happening right now. My point is, another week goes by, another month, another year. And instead of being distracted by the new claim, go, what about that claim? Obama, please, Pelosi, anybody. So you guys know this, though. Again, I'm saying this just to make the point. I think most of you are well past that. It's frustrating, is it not?
Situation. So it is happening, but we need more focus. And I think, as the speaker mentioned, it needs to be a focus nationwide. Where is this also happening? Not just in Minneapolis, but where else is this?
Yeah, right. Isn't it a bit weird that you guys over-focus in this one specific politically advantageous location? Yes. And then do nothing about it? Yes. It's not about what they're claiming, guys. It's just not. And the truth is, there's fraud all over the place. And most of it being conducted by you guys right there.
Going on.
Well, and if any of that money went to ISIS, al-Shabaab, and we know that the chokehold that they had on some of the young people who had, whose families had migrated here years ago from Somalia, we remember those cases of those young men who had tried to join ISIS and were radicalized. So that money, it's a big job.
Right. Let's just throw in a completely hypothetical basis. If maybe it did this, that would be crazy. Great journalism, guys. Think about what they're saying right there. If it could have possibly been connected because we claim Somalis fund al-Shabaab, which we claim is ISIS, even though the U.S. government created and funded and works with ISIS and al-Qaeda and al-Shabaab was created by the U.S. government's intervention in Somalia. But who cares about the facts, guys? Let's just talk nonsense and hypotheticals because that's mainstream alternative media today. Or excuse me, mainstream. They're the same thing. I mean, it really is infuriating, isn't it? How stupid and dumbed down all of this has gotten. Jim Jordan is trying to make it sound as if they've done something there. Now, the real point for me is that this is about them going more over there when nothing has happened. What do you mean more? What has happened thus far? What he pointed to was in Biden's administration. So, guys, if you can't see by now that they're just kind of shuffling things around to get you distracted, I don't know what you're looking at. But again, I'm of the mind that most of you are well beyond that. Now, here is Art Vandelay. I love the name, but this is a ridiculous comment he makes here. Now, first of all, Nancy Mace, I believe, is playing the kind of counterbalance right now. I think Nancy Mace is clearly a Trump loyalist kind of position based on what she's already been doing. And now she's sort of playing this like Epstein files counterbalance. It's, again, about follow through. What do they do over the next 6 months? Not just what they yell in the moment. It's easy to yell the thing that makes you look like you care. It's hard to care and hard to follow through with that. At the end of the day, right now, I think she's trying to play that because they know that people are unhappy with the Republican Party. And this is sort of maybe this can carry that through. She says, today I wrote to the CIA to release all Jeffrey Epstein files. Oh, great. Good job. Where were you every other year before this? Which is the same point to be made about all of them, left or right. Why didn't you care during Trump's last administration? Why didn't you care during Biden's administration? Now it's all about political momentum. But either way, what do you mean you wrote to the CIA to release all the files? Isn't that what's already going on? Why is Nancy Mace going, please do this, going to do anything? We're asking for all the documents, all the images. She just knows this is what people want to hear. That's what I think. But let's hope it goes. Stay good. Let's see it. But understand that just like Marjorie Taylor Greene, I don't think there's a true, genuine motive here or intention. I believe Epstein was intel, pedophiles, sex traffickers. She's just trying to lean into what people are saying, whether true or not. Now, Art Vandelay says, Nancy follows me, so maybe she'll see this. I'm asking politely for our elected officials to stop this madness. It's over. MAGA influencers lied to their audience for years about this crap. You realize he's saying this with what we can see. Now, I want to say one thing before I read further. You guys know me. You watch this show. More than anything, the last thing I would ever ask is for you to trust me, believe me, question me, check the source material, challenge my mindset on these things. Hopefully we collectively come to something new. But my point is that you know me enough to know that I'm not partisan. I'm not leaning into one side or the other. I loathe the left-right paradigm. I think it bothers me how much influence it still has, even as everyone seems to see through it. I'm saying all of that for you to recognize that, well, that's really frustrating. It's just to be honest, I was looking at the that's George Costanza from Seinfeld, and it's just making me laugh, and it completely distracted me. Anyway, the point I was making, it says, I'm asking politely for our elected officials to stop this madness. It's over. MAGA influencers lied to their audience for years about this crap. Oh, okay. That was just the general point. I'm glad I didn't lose that. So you guys know me enough to know, not partisan and so on, that I'm talking about these files in this one point, Epstein files, whatever we're discussing. What I'm trying to relay to you is when I'm pointing at these things and I say this is something that matters, I shouldn't even need to say that. You guys know that I believe these things are relevant, not just because, oh my God, it might mean something, or, oh, I hate Trump. Look, he found his name in there. Let's hype this. Or like I said in the beginning, a lot of this stuff was subjective and is absolutely, might mean nothing. But what I'm trying to show you is that I think it's important that we see that there is, regardless of statements like this, actionable information that's already there, without question. And that they've chosen to ignore it, like the Zorro Ranch point. Now, there's plenty more than that, showing you that people are lying, showing you connections that are in and of themselves something that should be done, in connections between foreign intelligence to our government, any number of things. So when people come out and say that there's nothing, we were lied to, they either are, I guess, being manipulated by that sentiment from the media that they think they're supposed to listen to, or they're trying to lie to you for pretty nefarious reasons. But what do you think? Do you think that what we're looking at with all this information and all that we've already known added to this is just some hypothetical guess? There's a big difference, by the way, between having things that we think based on evidence and then things that we actually see demand action. And I believe that is what we have in this right now. That's why they keep lying. That's why they keep trying to shuffle things around. That's why people in other places of the world are, in fact, going to jail. I just think that's important to stress, guys, because these people are starting to win certain people over. This is my point in the past about people who listen to people who they think are smart, people who might actually be book smart, who convince themselves that I do what smart people do, right? They get played by the system. Well, this guy's an engineer or whatever, and he knows it, and they kind of fall in those traps without realizing that just because you're an intelligent person does not mean you have the, I guess, even just the wherewithal, like the ability to see around the manipulations that play everybody. There's a very different thing in there. That's why people who step into this conversation, conspiracy theory and otherwise, it takes like COVID-19. We saw a lot of that. We saw these doctors who suddenly went, oh my God, this entire industry is full of lies and manipulations. And then it took them years to fully grasp everything else. And they're still going through that journey like we all are. Anyway, I digress. The point is just to realize, guys, there's so much here. This is not an distraction. This is not some kind of a hype story just because of partisanship. This is real, and it goes well back beyond. You could argue that this kind of thing goes back to basically the beginning of this country. And I don't mean that in the sense of like day one, but that they're from a very long time ago, we've been dealing with some form of what we're talking about today. Anyway, and then it says, so first just saying MAGA influencers lie to their audiences. And then MAGA friendly politicians like Nancy Mace took the cheese. And just like they've done with any number of BS conspiracy theories. Like what, though? I'd love to hear what he thinks of the BS conspiracy theories. There are plenty of them out there, for sure. He says, what happens when you constantly feed people conspiracies? They end up not believing in anything. Now, there's a valid point to be made in that. But you see, what I would point to is the people he's probably listening to, the mainstream alternative media. And I'm not because I disagree, but because I can prove to you they're wrong and lying. Because if you constantly give people the false information, like the false construct on top of the Somali story, or any number of examples about Venezuela, you could go down the list for the last year alone and find hundreds of examples of them pushing lies that we can prove are lies that he probably agreed with. But then people come out with this kind of story because it's counter to what the team wants, and that's the false story. But he may even believe that. So the point is the same, and I agree with it. They end up believing in nothing if you constantly push false information. I just believe he's on the wrong side of that point, but maybe he's dishonest. It says, where are the arrests? Where are the indictments? Where are the convictions? And where is the list? That's what we should be saying. He says there is no list. There was never a list. Neither Epstein nor Maxwell were charged with trafficking anyone to any person other than Epstein. So we have to really address how stupid this is. Guys, let's be clear, first of all, that that's not what our government said or anybody involved in this until now it was uncomfortable. But you have to understand that the charge of trafficking is, look, Epstein was involved with this. Not that Maxwell was bringing people to him and that's all it was. You can quite literally prove with well beyond this dump of emails that Epstein was involved with intelligence networks, involved with much higher level activity. You can also prove that they were involved with actual trafficking and manipulation of children. The argument he's trying to make is that Maxwell was basically bringing him children or bringing him young girls because he was a creep, and that's it. But why would that then be trafficking? Are you now saying that she went out of country and out of the to bring people to him? I mean, you could argue that, I guess, would make sense. You have to understand the evidence challenges that. So he is either lying or doesn't even understand what he's talking about. There is no evidence, he writes, of an international pedophile ring. I mean, come on, guys. Like, this is the stupidest part of this. You could argue that Epstein's a lie. You could argue that every part of this is a deception that are but to argue that that statement is true is to be completely ignorant of the world reality. I mean, like a documented international, what's the name of the group? There are international entities that document child trafficking, that document child abuse, and they will tell war zones, just normal action. Our child protective services in the United States has been called out for this. Not because they're doing it, I do believe there's an overlap, but because what they do and the way that they conduct themselves creates an opening for that to happen. But all I'm saying is that that's provable reality. This has been covered, the documentaries about it, and he has the nerve to come in and say there is no such thing. So let me get this straight. We can acknowledge that there are pedophiles, right? Art Vandelay? Yes. Okay. We can agree that there are higher level people that manipulate through governments and intelligence for any number of purposes, right? Yes. We can acknowledge that there are sex trafficking discussions across the world, right? We're not denying sex trafficking, right? We're all okay. So all those pieces are independent. They all exist separately around the world, but we're going to try to pretend that there's nobody out there trying to work with somebody else. No one's trying to say, I don't know, move them somewhere else for other purposes. You realize how stupid that is? Like, this is my point. I find this to be intentionally deceptive, which in effect is covering up the very thing he thinks he's claiming isn't real. Think about how dark that is. Not just this Epstein case, but trafficking in general, pedophile rings in general. Doesn't that remind you of what the government now telling you this is what they were saying for the last 10 years? You brought up child trafficking. People were calling it a conspiracy theory. No cabal of elites abusing women. I mean, what a so there's not a group of elitist people who are abusing women anywhere in the world? You have to realize this is a desperate effort, in my opinion. He goes, let's be real. The release of the Epstein files has been an unmitigated disaster. Well, that's true. Victims have had their names, and yes, that's because they're either incompetent or they did that to muddy the waters. Innocent people have had their names dragged through the mud. Yeah, well, too bad, man. You realize realize the reason this is happening is because of the way they've covered this up. And now, look, I understand that there are people that might. Well, let's put it this way: if there are names that came out with these files that are ultimately of people who have nothing to do with it, then people who are making allegations that are unsubstantiated should be called out for that. I mean, look, you've realized people yell out negative things about me or other people in this field all the time. It doesn't make it okay, but you just have to understand that the idea is that we shouldn't go through this process to find the truth because somebody else might get yelled the wrong thing at, and realize that people like you and people, I shouldn't say that, people in the independent media, mainstream and alternative, will make those allegations on purpose to muddy the waters. End this madness. Okay, so end it meaning move on. We don't care anymore. We're not going to deal with this. So here's Harrison Smith. Here's the weird thing about this. Trump is not in the Epstein files like they are insinuating. Well, let's listen to what they had to say.
So why are Republicans so interested in Bill and Hillary Clinton? It's because they're trying to distract from the fact that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files thousands and thousands of times. In those files, there's highly disturbing allegations of Donald Trump raping children, of Donald Trump threatening to kill children. So I encourage your press to go look at these allegations, and I'm highly disturbed that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche just got the law wrong. Yesterday, he said, essentially, that it is not a crime to party with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, that's actually not correct. If Jeffrey Epstein was human trafficking minors for these sex parties, and you show up and patronize the establishment at that party, yes, you're guilty. Because
isn't it interesting? And this is just a good insight to the window of the partisanship. Could you imagine him saying this when they were the ones in power? Just casually discussing sending children to sex parties? No, they would have looked at you like you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, while the Republicans at the time were going, oh, the pedophile is coming down. Right now it's flipped around. Now you've got the Republicans over there clutching their pearls going, how dare you? That's not real. And now you've got the Democrats going, children sex parties. I mean, it has to shock us free. This is so bombastic right now. It shows you how clearly they play these character roles. Now, it doesn't mean that he very well may mean this right now, because it is, in fact, the reality. He said allegations. He didn't imply that it was real. He said allegations. But my point would be that even if he means this right now, he very well may pull that punch when it's his time to be in power. We know this, guys, because they're probably in some way implicated. That's a good guess right now, to be honest.
Patronizing is part of the law, the federal sex trafficking law. So Deputy General Tav just got that wrong, which maybe explains why they aren't investigating all these folks, including Donald Trump. He needs to read the law and investigate these people. He also needs to resign, not only for not knowing the law, but a massive, not only screw up, but the biggest privacy violation in history. They release a lot of pictures of minors.
I can't believe that's not a bigger story right now. Why? I mean, that should be like, there should be institutions, the FBI. I mean, what's going on? They quite literally put out child pornography. They put out innocent pictures of innocent children naked. They put out names of the very victims they claim they were trying to help, addresses. I mean, come on. There's only one way. It's either an accident or they did it to just throw a stick into the spokes. Either way, that's insane. And we just move on. Where's all, I mean, yes, it was covered by the corporate media, but are you telling me the media that is hell-bent on destroying Trump no matter what wouldn't be fixated on that forever? It's just so damn obvious, man.
Unredacted, just violated the privacy of these girls. It is uncalled for what they did. The one thing that they could not do under this law was to invade the privacy of these women now, who were girls at the time, who were
and realized that gave them the opening to basically redact everything. They could have just been like, it's all under that law. It's all, which, I mean, clearly there's people that are trying to show they probably would have got caught because they're bad at what they do, but they could have. Instead, they just clumsily let out the pictures of people. Again, it very well may have been by design, but somebody should be accountable for that. Somebody, but guess what? We don't have their intercommunications, even though it's required by law. And now we don't know who did what. They probably never tell you.
Victims of sex trafficking. Also, he met with Ghislaine Maxwell, moved her to minimum security prison, and then got a puppy for her. So,
right. I mean, let's think about this, guys. Let's not forget that point, right? Maxwell, before all this happened, got a proffer agreement that gave them direction. They moved her into a cushy prison despite her being charged and found guilty of human trafficking. And that's no big deal, though. Just add to the list of things that are by themselves should be like earth-shattering that just end up being ignored because no big deal. Well, here's what he says. Trump is not, this is Harrison Smith again, Trump is not in the Epstein files like they're insinuating. Well, no, bud, they literally are exactly in those files, exactly the way they said. As he writes, there are a bunch of ridiculous, disproved allegations, but nothing of substance. Okay, well, if you want to play it again, he didn't go, this means everything. He simply said there's a lot of allegations about Trump in there. This should be investigated. I mean, look, I can point to other clips of Harrison where he'll make objective points about exactly this kind of stuff. But weirdly, when it comes to Donald Trump, he acts like that's not true, what he just said, and then repeats what he just said. Come on. There's something pulling this punch. I'm pretty sure we can guess where that's coming from. However, people close to Trump, like Howard Lutnick, are implicated. Well, bud, Lutnick is just the same way Trump is in many provable ways. Maybe you don't know that because you're buying the narrative swinging around mainstream alternative media. There are actionable information. There are actionable points within these files, two that I just pointed to, that we can show they never investigated, but there's plenty more than that. But to claim it's just nothing but allegation, well, let's put it this way on top of all of that. Let's just say they are just nothing substantive. Well, we would demand that, wouldn't we? You want to tell me, Harrison, how you know for a fact that every one of those things were investigated because Cash told you? Genuine question. What kind of a journalist is going to say that's the fact because the guys lying about the files told me, unless you somehow have insight into the fact that everyone was investigated, followed up, and proven to be false? I'd love to see that. I would credit you for that, but I doubt that's the reality. So if the Dems were at all sincere about getting to the bottom of this, they would pressure Trump through his associates, but not lying about him, Trump himself. Okay, again, you want to point out anything he said and there's a lie, I'll give you $100. It is a lie because you don't want to believe what you think the insinuation is, but guess what? We're not talking about insinuations. He said there's allegations about Trump raping children. There are allegations about Trump raping children. Period. So why are you lying about that, Harrison? It's a good question. Or maybe you just don't see it. I don't know. Now, here is another example of this. Mike Davis. What accountability for lawfare against Trump and his allies, or want that? Then stop demanding every good person at the Justice Department sift through documents of the Epstein files. That's quite a hard turn. Nobody more than the Republican Party is calling this out. Or excuse me, nobody but the Republican Party was calling for this. And here we are with the Republican Party now turning around and going, no, it's not there. Nothing there. Nothing burger. I mean, think about that. Clay Morrison says this is actually real. I had to read it twice. So you're saying Massey calling for the files is preventing the DOJ from going after criminals? Meaning there's no criminals in the Epstein files? Murderers, cannibals, sex traffickers? Now, to be clear again, a lot of the things he's referencing are subjective, like reports from the FBI. Doesn't mean false, though. As far as I can tell, most of them haven't been investigated, but we don't know the full picture. So when he pointed those things, the point is we want to investigate it, not that we can prove that is somebody should be arrested. But it's still a valid point. The DOJ is so busy putting PDFs online to focus on anything else. Gotcha. Think about that, guys. You now have Turning Point USA, Mike Davis telling you that we should stop calling for this information. Even though these people were telling you that you should be doing that before and when Democrats were in power. That's pretty sad. So, Todd Blanche, 2025. I work closely with Kash Patel and Bongino on the joint FBI-DOJ memo regarding the Epstein files. All of us signed off on the contents of the memo and the conclusion stated in the memo. The suggestion by anybody that there was any daylight between the FBI and DOJ is false. 2025. And do you remember what happened? They said, there's nothing more. They said, that's it. We put out the first part. There's nothing more. We did what we could. And then what we found out later was there was more because we got more. And that's what we're pointing to right now. So Jeff says, remember when the DOJ and FBI tried to convince us there was no client list, no persons of interest, told us Epstein killed himself and tried to pronounce the entire Epstein case closed? None of these people and institutions are worthy of our trust. I mean, this is my point about Trump is the same thing. You can't keep watching them lie to you and say, that's it. And then we go, no, it's not. There's more. And they go, no, that's it. It's all porn. They go, well, we want, and then eventually they, there's a truck on my desk. Or, oh, nope, now there's more. And it goes back and forth and back and forth. But remember, they said, that's it. And now we're sifting through things that are bombshells. So if you can't stand back and go, then what? They clearly lied to you right there. They didn't just accidentally fall back into all of these things that were actually important. They were hoping desperately that you stopped. Like that Truman Show point. Right? The most transparent administration in history, DC Drano, and they're holding up all those files that were redacted that gave us nothing. They were hoping that was enough. It's very simple. Crystal Ball highlights what Reuters had to say. So again, they're telling you that's it. Because that's what's happening. Trump is now saying that's it. No more files coming. Reuters writes, millions of files related to Jeffrey Epstein suggest the existence of a global criminal enterprise that carried out acts meeting the legal threshold of crimes against humanity. A panel of independent experts appointed by the UN Human Rights Council says. So that doesn't mean don't question everything, right? As always. But this is from the 17th, telling you that UN experts are now going through the information and saying, yeah, that's a big deal. They could be wrong. They could be lying, but realize how crazy it is that this is where we are. Well, everyone seems to be acknowledging the importance of this, except for the people who gave it to you. Crystal Ball says, and we were told there was nothing to see here. No crimes to prosecute. No further investigation required. Just imagine what's in the files they're still hiding. I thought this was funny. For the podcast, it's a meme. A guy on the right, you've seen this classic setup with Mr. Bean, but it says conspiracy theorist 10 years ago he's studying, and then it shows Mr. Bean to the news 2026, trying to copy off the conspiracy theorists from 10 years ago. You remember how often they told us this stuff was nonsense, or whatever else, anything we're talking about from geoengineering to, they used to tell you black helicopters were a conspiracy theory. It's really, it's just, it's a provable reality. Like any number of these things, you can look it up right now. They're still humorous and alarming. So Brian Allen reports that they're telling you they're done. No more. No more's coming out. And remember, that's like the second time we've heard that. So probably going to see some more after this, but probably, who knows what they'll actually do. At the end of the day, we should demand everything because we have a right to know what's going on. They're doing nothing.
Growing backlash and political backlash, rather Republican political backlash, against what one lawmaker is now labeling the Epstein administration. After Attorney General Pam Bondi said the DOJ is done releasing the Epstein files, even though roughly half of the 6 million documents they have are still under wraps. Even Republicans are incensed, including Senator John Kennedy, who said this weekend the Justice Department needs to, quote, release everything. South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace tweeted, quote, the days of cover-up are over, a sentiment echoed.
No more. That's it. But we'll see. I doubt that's when it's ultimately going to end this. There's no way I get away from this, but here's Trump yet again. Bonk saying he's really going to die on this hill. This is going to be his legacy. A lot of Republicans are saying that right now. Here's Trump.
And no, he made a statement about me and Jeffrey Epstein. I have nothing to do with that. I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. And in fact, if you look at the DOJ, they announced, they released 3 million pages. It's like this is all they're supposed to be doing. And frankly, the DOJ, I think, should just say, we have other things to do, because that whole thing has turned out, other than Bill Clinton and, Bill Gates and lots of people that there are a lot of questions about it, but nothing on me. But it was even sort of better than that, because they found that Jeffrey Epstein and this sleazebag writer named Michael Wolff were conspiring against Donald Trump to lose the election. So Epstein was conspiring with a writer for me to lose the election. So right there, you know that I had nothing to do with this guy. But yeah, it's a terrible thing. The amount of time that's being wasted. When Epstein was alive, like 10 years ago, nobody cared about it. But they're only doing it. But now it's really hitting back on them because Bill Clinton is such a big part of it. The Democrats.
So we didn't care so much that we were all aggressively covering the story, right? And it's just lies. He stands up there and goes, "I'm exonerated." No, it's not true. No one believes that.
Democrats are pushing it. And the problem is that it's turning out to be the Democrats that were with and conspired with.
It's just such a lazy lie. Yes, I agree, but that's not what it's turning out to show. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I think the Democrats have been more implicated over the years. My opinion. I think it's all of them. But what's happening right now is the opposite while he tries to kind of flounder the other direction. It's very hard to watch, guys, because he doesn't think that. It's pretty clear he sees what's going on. That's just pretty sad.
Epstein. So I think you're probably going to see a little pullback from them. But think of it. They were working together to try and help me lose the election. But this is the Oval Office, so I guess that didn't work out too well.
Right.
Okay, one more.
He's the small one fighting the power as he's the power. They just love to frame themselves as still kind of like the underling fighting. They're the David fighting Goliath. It's just not the reality. Now, here is Ducey telling you that they're planning for how they're going to frame the midterms and our all of our accomplishments, which I agree with Murray. He says no amount of propaganda will save the Republicans in the midterms. Now, whatever happens next in the midterms, I don't think really, my opinion about the way the voting works in this country. I don't believe that it's even fully, I don't believe it translates to the outcome to make it as clear as possible. Who knows with influence, but I think there's like foundationally clear evidence that on all sides our government's been manipulating this as far as back as I've been doing this. And we can all seem to see it on the other side, but just recognize that. Now, the only saying that is that we should question it regardless. But here, what we have, where was I on the Ducey point about the propaganda is that ultimately him coming out and claiming we're going to be talking about all the good things for our accomplishments, but I think it's about them game planning how in the world they're going to get Republicans to stop talking about this. I don't think they're going to. I honestly think it's near impossible for that to happen right now. But the point about his midterms, or the point about the midterms, who knows what's going to happen to the voting process. But if there is some kind of a if it does translate at all, I would argue they're probably going to lose a lot. But because I think that's the way it's kind of supposed to go. But who knows whether that's organic or not. But here's what Ducey had to say.
Yes, I just got a text from a senior White House official who is confirming a story that just crossed in Axios. Susie Wiles, the White House chief of staff, James Blair, one of her top lieutenants, and a bunch of chiefs of staff, as well as some cabinet-level secretaries, are meeting right now on Capitol Hill in private, or I should say near Capitol Hill in private, to try to figure out President Trump's messaging strategy, how to sell his accomplishments and what he plans to do to help their chances in the midterms. Of course, next week, the State of the Union will be the chance to do that in prime time. Brett.
You'll see it right here. Peter Ducey live on the North Lawn. Peter, thanks.
All right, so we're game planning on how we can, demonstrate all of our accomplishments. I just think it's just like before. I think they're in like a serious moment right now where they're going, how in the world are we going to get past this? But just they're trying to, project something different. I don't think it's going to work. Ian Carroll says, in regard to Nancy Mace's post, we're calling on the CIA to allow us to view all records. Okay. Something feels weird about this to me, especially since what I said before, I think that she's playing a counterbalance from within the partisanship to make you think somebody within it cares about you. I could definitely be wrong. Congress needs to know what, if any, relationship the CIA had with Epstein. I mean, first of all, you're talking about the CIA. Okay. What do you think they're going to do? I feel like this is a very dangerous thing to argue, to call for. Classified or not, we want to see it. Now realize she's not calling about it for you. She's saying Nancy Mace wants to see it. So it's just one more layer of we don't get to see what she sees, and why would we trust what she has to tell us? At the end of the day, I don't trust the CIA in any possible way. Classified or not, we want to see it. The American people deserve answers. Yes, we do. Not Mace telling us those answers. Ian says, yes, this is 100% the next step, and it's non-negotiable. Well, I think there's a lot of other directions we could go other than, hey, CIA, come drip feed us what you want us to see about something you were clearly involved in. Really? Now he says, time for the CIA under Gabbard to step up to the plate. Now, look, maybe he means this as like, let's call them out. I hope so. But what Nancy Mace is saying, we're calling on the CIA to help us. That's what she's calling for. And he says, yes, that's non-negotiable. I just think that's a very weird response to the CIA, who is completely implicated in this entire conversation. And on top of that, I just thought it was important to include this, and I'm responding to an old post from Alex Jones saying, they're connected to the CIA. And that's when I said, oh, you mean the CIA that Trump is down here saying, we need to get them involved now? Yes, the same CIA that Trump said we need involved. The same CIA that said our RFK Jr. said killed his uncle? Yes. Sure seems weird, doesn't it? Except when you realize that it's all a bunch of narrative control and manipulation. But the truth, here's the actual post itself. The CIA must get involved. Is that this is an interwoven intelligence problem that goes well beyond one country, as Whitney has covered more than once. So I'm very concerned with people saying, let's get the CIA involved with this conversation. That seems like the wrong step to me, quite frankly. Worth considering. Now, Chris Martinson also adds a very relevant point to the timeline of all this. He goes, it's just a complete coincidence that the DOJ has completely withheld all of the Epstein documents immediately before, during, and after 9/11. Come on, guys. For the podcast, it's it's a good graphic because it really makes a point. So they're playing this game. Well, that's it. It's all redacted or it's all the bad stuff, even though they've already tried to play that game and released more. And I don't even believe the number we're getting given, so it's probably more than half. So we're told we have half. Okay. Just so happens that in that half is all of the time frame right in that most important inflection point for this country that they were clearly involved with. If you understand the Israel connection through Epstein, through what happened in this country. That's my opinion. I just don't think it's my opinion. I think it's a fact, but you can decide. But think about that they have chosen to withhold a very specific time frame. You know what that means, guys. I mean, I shouldn't say it like that. I think it's pretty clear. But you know what it suggests, right? That because of the involvement of what happened in 9/11, which goes well beyond a bunch of Saudi Arabian people on a plane, but of course, even from that, you could clearly draw connections through Saudi Arabia to all the things we know it connects to, but that's not even the real story. I'll recommend, again, James Corbett's work. This is our watch along, easy one to pop up. False Flags, A Secret History of Al-Qaeda, watch along, goes all the way through 9/11. James Corbett's always doing great work. And they're keeping that from your view. That very well may be the entire reason why this is happening the way that it is. In regard to the half not being seen, the way that they, oopsie, we released all these bad things, or oopsie, you guys can't deal with nice things because you're jumping at shadows of subjective points that we put out on purpose, so we have to pull back. Either way, I think it's pretty obvious what's going on right now. And this, understand that 9/11 or any kind of war conversation or Israel, it's all of our government problem, guys. Lastly on this, on Zorro Ranch, Shadow of Ezra points out the new owner of Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch, who we just talked about, Don Huffines, announces that the property is already, quote, under construction. If you just watched our show, that you should laugh out loud right now, and is being transformed into a Christian retreat. Of course it is. He says he knew it was a dark place and wanted to turn it into a place of light. Guys, he just literally said the opposite in an interview. Not about both, in fact, about construction and about what he feels about the location. He says the plan is all along to make this property a Christian retreat. Come on. Okay, this guy, my gut, there's something very wrong right here. The way that he's now responding because of the attention. I just covered this in 2 previous shows, guys. The representative from New Mexico is calling this out. She called for the investigation based on the, you know what? I might even have that very quickly. I'll play that real quick because I want you to see the email beneath it. Oh, maybe not actually. I think it's gone from yesterday. The point was that video of the person who's speaking about it. So we've shown, actually, I'll bring this up so you have something to go on. I don't have the show in front of me that I think it's the one before last, the one before that. But this, I'll just bring this up as the article. Allegations of bodies buried in Epstein's New Mexico ranch prompt investigation calls. Now, the point here is that Garcia Richard sent the letter. I forget what her position was. Oh, it's right here. New Mexico's Public Lands Commissioner, Stephanie Garcia Richard. She called this out, I believe, in 2019, based on an email that quite literally showed files of child sex manipulation and said that this is the evidence and the whole thing. We've never got to see that. And I don't think anybody should want to see it, but it's given to the FBI. She called it out and said, this is crazy. Someone needs to investigate. Somebody who worked at Zorro Ranch sent this to, I believe, what was his name? Edward. It was a commentator in the conservative radio movement, a radio field. And so ultimately she called it out. Nothing happened. That's proven. Now this comes back around and she's coming out in 2026, 7 years later. All right. No, it's 2019? I can't remember if that was the date or not, but okay, somewhere around there. The point was that she comes out now and says, I can't believe this isn't being investigated. I called it out then. Nobody cared. Here I am again with the same call, which needs to show you that they never investigated this. So that's one point out of all of these that alone should stop them from pretending there's nothing there. It's powerful, guys. Now, I'm coming to this. He himself was saying before that it was some random auction. They weren't even aware, whatever he was saying, sort of like benign dismissal, and saying clearly that, what was it? The family was all involved. I'm trying to rehash it all in my mind. That there was really nothing to go on, right? That there's nothing problematic. Now, because of all this coverage, he's now saying it's already under construction. Don't you think that if that had come up, if it was actually under construction, that would have been stated in that last discussion that was like days ago? Now, maybe he just forgot to say it. I'm not going to pretend we know for sure. But the allegation is there are bodies buried on this ranch. More than just the 2 they're referencing in that email. There's allegations of sex trafficking from people in these files. A Native American woman on this ranch. And it's never been investigated. And now suddenly, when it gets attention, well, guess what? We've dug everything up. It's already being constructed. Think about that, guys. They're digging things up right now in a location that very well maybe is a crime scene.
Now you have plans to take something evil and bring it into goodness, bring it into light and positivity. Tell us about that plan.
The new mainstream alternative media, guys. Half a step removed from Congress. Bringing you the truth. Slanted in interest of the government.
Well, of course, that is the main reason I bought the property. This was obviously a dark place, and we wanted to put light in a dark place.
I'm pretty sure his statement before was that they didn't even know it was. They bought it off auction, and wasn't. But now he's suggesting he bought it because he knew what was going on there. I don't know how you don't see this as being weird.
It always shines the brightest when you do that. My faith is so strong in Jesus, and it really is. And
It sounds like Elon Musk today going, I believe in Jesus. They all seem like they're reaching for something.
Going to make this, the plan all along is to make this property into a Christian retreat. As a matter of fact, it's under construction today. And that's our goal. That's why we named it San Rafael. We named it Saint Raphael, as you probably know, an archangel, and his what he does and helps people with is healing and being the healer, and also blessing those that are traveling. And I think that's really.
I know for sure that this guy is maybe he has no idea, but I just get a weird sense from it, and I just don't like the over the top kind of I've dealt with a lot of charlatans in my life, and especially from a religious perspective. And it's just something about it when people are just kind of like doth protest too much. Like, it's not necessary to just, it's like I always say about people in who I'm so strong and I'm the strongest person around. That usually indicates weakness. Maybe not even necessarily physical weakness, but weakness. And I think that's worth thinking about in this sense, like just felt very over the top to me, but you guys can decide for yourself. My point is about the timing, the construction of a place that's not right now currently being called for investigation, has been called to be investigated by people in the government going back to 2019. And now he's digging up the ground. I'll include this for you. Oops. That's the wrong one. Move that down. There we go. So next, let's get into a couple more points before we get into the bill itself about Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and some of the people within this team. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino in their joint interview avoid the Jeffrey Epstein topic altogether. What a surprise. And instead tell the audience that the decisions they made while working together were just too difficult. They admit that most of the time the decisions they made were required permission from the top. I can't even believe that they said what they did here, because you realize the FBI director is not supposed to be beholden to the president. Like, you realize if the president commits a crime, they could be investigated by the FBI. But no, Kash Patel is going, what do I do, Mr. President? That's been our point the whole time. They do what they're told. That's not how it's supposed to work. Bondi, same thing. She's not a secretary, as that person aptly made that point in the Congress. She is supposed to be independent. They're clearly not. This is just hard to watch, guys.
Everything's a level 10 decision, Kash. A level 10 meaning there's a pardon the language, but a shitty decision and a shittier one. Because if there was a good decision to be made, someone else made it. And then when those decisions, that's every day. I know you know this because I would knock on your door and you'd be like, what now? And I'd be like, here we go again. Like something else will come up. But I just want to put into perspective for folks out there, when that decision can't even be made by me, it goes to you. When it doesn't go to you, it goes like to the president's desk. He's dealing with like level 11 decisions. And that's the thing in DC is that's why the batting average isn't always going to be 1,000. There's no good call to be made or someone else would have made it. There's just really tough decisions.
What does that even mean? There's no good call or somebody else would have made it? That's got to be the stupidest argument I've ever heard. That's like saying, well, if there was something to be done, it would have already been done. That's the same point. That's not true. That's a lazy sidestep, because I don't know, at the top of my head, arrest people for crimes. That's a possible action, right? I mean, there are only two choices, or as if there's only good or bad, or good or a little bit worse. There's a false binary, left or right. They just know this is how people get manipulated. And we have to be clear about this, guys. They were just like with the Trump administration, or what they're all doing. We're out there going absolute everywhere, bring it down, Epstein files, everybody, all the Democrats. And then the moment they stepped into power, they're like, Epstein? I don't know. We have to look into it. Like, it's just lazy. Now, at the very least, you could have been like, well, I was wrong. That would have been a way to go. I said a lot of stuff on the podcast, but when I got here, it's a different picture. They kind of did that, but they did it in a cheap, weak way. They didn't take the ownership of that mistake. They just said, well, it's more difficult like they're doing now. So they lied to you, guys. They lied to you because they kept carrying that forward. Bongino ran away and now acts like it's that's just sad to me. And now you're back here acting like it's just so difficult. There was really no other choices but to cover up what we're watching right now. I mean, you realize Kash has been caught lying like 3 or 4 times in this. So you can't argue it was just a couple of bad choices. You guys are lying to people. And I'm pretty sure most of the Republican Party knows that. Even people that still support Trump seem to call these guys out.
Where, there's a shit call and a shittier call. And listen, that's what we signed up for.
Oh, by the way, they're going to repeat that again like 6 times. Like, that's the point, that they just keep repeating, because they're really trying to stress to you, don't blame me. It just was a tough thing. It was tough. It was hard. Very difficult.
That's how it rolls.
Look, yeah, these are difficult decisions, Dan. That's why you volunteered to jump back in. It wasn't just going to be, hey, we're going to do this job. It's going to be super easy. We're not going to have to make any hard decisions.
Yeah, you following so far, guys? It was hard.
And we're not going to have to combat a press corps that has largely been biased and full of inaccurate reporting.
Yeah, you mean like literally all the time, forever. Under every administration, forever. So you got the same circumstances.
But we made those decisions collectively in the best interest of the nation. And if we hadn't, then none of this would be true. None of this.
Oh, there's little talking points he brought to make sure he gave you all the good things we've done. Oh, what was that, like 6, 7 things? You're knocking it out of the park, bud.
Would be possible. If President Trump had made the hard decisions to allow us and give us the resources that we need.
If he hadn't have made the hard decisions to allow us, I don't know what I'm going to say, and give us the things we need, what's hard about that? It's a formula. It's formulaic. You know, you're supposed to go, Trump, it's all responsible because Trump did the things that led us down, blah, blah, Trump's the greatest. And that's what they're doing. That's an employee, guys.
And to back the blue in law enforcement and to prioritize working with state and local authorities, then we wouldn't be able to do what we did. But you're right. We had a lot of hard decisions, and that comes with the territory of the job.
What you did? I mean, is it over? You're in the middle of administration. What did you do? You can't, you can't point, oh, I arrested some people over here. Like, if you go back and compare to it's worth looking at what people have done in previous administrations. I think they're all corrupt. But it's actually pretty insulting for him to act like, or Trump to act like, they've changed the world when all they've done is actually less than what you'd expect. And far more of all the worst things they said they weren't going to do, like Trump and spending more or no war or whatever else. It's the same conversation. Now, I don't know what, this doesn't probably mean anything. I found the way he reacts here, this facial thing, I found it maybe telling. Maybe if you read anything in it.
To back the blue in law enforcement and to prioritize working with state and local authorities, then we wouldn't be able to do what we did. But you're right. We had a lot of hard decisions, and that comes with the territory of the job. But once you look outside of the cauldron,
it's like I get the sense that like somebody was talking in his ear right there. That's what I think. Just my opinion. Watch again, and we'll let it play.
Blue in law enforcement and to it's just a
damn it. Sorry, I hit that button on accident. Back to this one.
State and give us the resources that we need, and to back the blue in law enforcement and to prioritize working with state and local authorities, then we wouldn't be able to do what we did. But you're right. We had a lot of hard decisions, and that comes with the territory of the job. But once you look outside of the cauldron of Washington, D.C., and this is one of the things that, I'm trying to remind myself of every day. Outside of here, there is a different America than the one that lives in the national capital region. And I try to remind myself every day when making those difficult decisions that you talked about, that we make on
like the 45th time they've made that point
on a daily basis, that we are making a decision collectively for the rest of America, not just for the minority of people that are living part-time in Washington, D.C., pulling the levers on Capitol Hill and stuff.
Yeah, except that's not true at all, though. It's fun to say those things out loud, like LARPing. That's what they know how to do. Not true, though. It's just not. What they're doing in every possible way is in the interest of the power structure. You think anything they've done is in the interest of the people of this country? I mean, you could argue about arresting people. Whatever. The point is about even that, to be honest, if you want to dig into what they're really doing, half the time I think like the reactionary doing things to make you think something's changing. But yes, I'm jaded when it comes to government. I just don't think that's the reality at all. Especially when it comes to Epstein, which is the point that most people are caring about right now. Now, here is another post where they talk about, and really, I'm tired of these guys. To be honest, the point is they say, what happened when we went across towns in America? You know what happened. People came up and said, oh my God, you're so great. Oh, you did everything. And you were so much safer because of you. I mean, how could you even like quantify that or like metric? How would you know that those actions are what caused you? It's just sad. Even if it did happen, those are people that are like, oh my God, you're Elvis because you're Trump's administration. The reality is, I don't think that's even true. But again, that's my opinion. But this is what they do. Trump comes and goes, before when I was going to be about to be in the presidency, people came to me and said, please, Trump, make a deal with me. Again, you could literally prove that didn't happen. He made that case saying, oh, they all reached out to me. No, they did not. That's what they do. Left, right, government. And there are some of them like these people are just really bad at it. And it's easy to see. So here's another clip about Antifa, just to make this case about the lies they were continually putting out there. Of course, this guy says, Kash Patel with, I'm sorry. It's just so funny to me. New, except it's been posted 17 times. Red flashy light, because that's the way you're supposed to do it. FBI Director Kash Patel drops major intel on Antifa funding network on Bonji. No, he didn't. He literally goes, we have information. It's coming out. That's the major bombshell. And guess what, guys? He said that 3 months ago on a show, and it didn't happen. As I told you, it would not. Mark my words again. We'll go forward another 3 months. And when we don't get anything, you'll find out. But see, this is the problem is people like this Jay guy, I'm just assuming because he's posed, are just like, yay, the thing. They're the best, no matter what, because that's my team. I actually don't know this person, but this is what we keep seeing. Look at the days of Antifa are coming to an end. Okay. Now here, let's actually watch the clip and then we'll come back to this. Oh, wait, maybe I didn't grab it. No, I did. Hold on. Where was that one?
It's just a willingness that you and I and this building's new leadership took to say, we're going to look at the facts that exist. We're not going to try to make up facts that don't so we can serve a political narrative. And wait till you, and I know you know this, but wait till you see what's coming in the next month or two on the funding streams related to this. You and I had launched a serious investigation. We had said these organizations don't operate alone, don't operate in silence. They operate with a heavy, heavy stream of funding.
So too does literally every operation, both those that are intelligent or illegitimate or corrupt, and just corporations that operate on funding. Funny how that works, right? Funding makes things operate. But, you know, you could make that into be the funding show, and it could very well mean that there's something going on there. But see, they have turned into, you know, you filming me is a crime. You yelling words at my face is violence, just like the left was saying before. Funny how that works. And now, literally, this same point. Then you tell the protests are funded? They're all effing funded. What are you talking about? Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be critical, and I'm not saying we can't prove that there's government or Soros or Musk type things that are influencing these things. What I'm saying is, where's the crime? Show it to me. I'll call it out. Show me how I know that there are in there. The crime is not money being given to people who are protesting. That's how they then illegalize or use that to shut down any protest. Funny how easy that is to break down. But let's be real, guys. There's funding like that on left and right. It's very easy to prove. Both sides want to make the other one out to be somehow gastroturfing or gaslighting. Part of them probably are. But when you find the crime in there, when people are doing something that's more than that, then that's the only thing we can act on. Not because I don't want to do more, because I think I can see people manipulating others, but because when you open that door, which is what the government's doing it all for, you give them that and then they can go further. And they're doing it right now. They're shutting down people protesting legally in this country because of the narratives they've set up by morons like this. So the point here,
serious investigation.
Antifa cell members indicted in Prairie Line shooting. Oh, by the way, that's from November 14th, 2025. Yes, guys, that's the same thing they said when that first happened. Now, again, like I say every time, because I'm objective, maybe a month from now, they'll break this all out and it'll be like, oh my God, look at maybe it breaks open the whole Antifa thing and they all go to jail. And I'll be like, yes, I was incorrect. Because if that's what happens, I would be. But again, I'm saying it's my opinion anyway, but I would come out and say, turns out I was wrong about that. Funny how that doesn't happen that often. Point that out, demonstrating our value. But overall, this is what they said then. And the idea is that nothing has happened. And he's coming out and saying the same thing, that we now have actionable information. They don't. I mean, I continue. And made the same thing about the Halloween discussion. They keep doing this. Indictments are only accusations. It drifts into the background and nothing goes any further. But they sure as hell get a bunch of Igor Gunthemans and cat turds and Nick Scher out there going, whoa, you're the greatest because you made something, you scream something online. As this person says, the same. Cash has made several announcements saying they found out who's funding Antifa in 2025. As of February 18, 2026, no formal charges or detailed revelations have been released. And that's the truth. There's nothing. Now, maybe tomorrow will happen. But how long can we, same point. How about Obama? Cash, didn't you tell us Obama was going down? He did. Didn't you tell us Pelosi was going to jail? He did. How long until that happens? Now, here is a Republican. This is Buddy Carter, saying something that I think really speaks to exactly I think it's two things. It's about trying to trick you into thinking this makes sense, but also just kind of slowly change the understanding or lack thereof. See if you catch what he says.
But some of the demands that the Democrats have put forth, we're not going to be able to obtain that. We can't have a warrant every time. And ICE is so important, and I support ICE to obtain that. We can't have a warrant every time.
Oh, okay. Just so casual. We can't just follow the law every time. That's crazy. That just is too much work. Kind of like what Trump was saying about the original due process point. That's just too much to deal with. Take the guns first, due process later. It's always been there for you guys if you're just not blindly following partisanship. He's simply saying it's just too difficult. That doesn't matter. You're absolutely legally required and constitutionally bound to have a warrant to do what they're discussing. It's the same conversation as before. They just don't care. It needs to stand out to you guys. If you truly care about these things, you're being led, like I said, like Elon Musk, it's a Pied Piper. They are literally guiding you into the very direction that you think you're fighting. Here's Dr. Oz. This is just funny in and of itself.
One nice thing about this administration is you might not like us, but you're going to get our version of the truth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's sure clear. And he goes on to be like, what do you mean the facts, though? The facts. It's like, oops, too late. You already said it. Just kind of funny to me. Very well. He probably did mean what he believes are the facts, but I think it's Freudian slip. You're going to get our version of the truth. Well, isn't that exactly what the Democrats were saying? It's my truth. And all your Republicans were like, you're so dumb. There's only one truth. I agree. Well, here we are with the Republicans going, my truth. And we're our version of the truth. There's only one empirical truth, guys. That's been every single thing we talk about. Now, you may be misunderstood about what that is. You may believe it and be wrong, but there is an empirical truth when it comes to just about anything or anything. That's the reality. Now, here is what Daniel Horowitz is showing you. Red states arresting their own people for speaking up against Agenda 2030, land grab for the AI data centers. In fact, here, I'm going to grab this really quickly, actually. I'm going to get into this in the next show, most likely tomorrow. But I just want to show you this because it is wild. This is from Jessica Rojas. I'm going to get tomorrow, most likely, depending on what happens, I'm going to get into more of the AI data center kind of tech side of things. But just on this point, this is just another report. A single AI data center in Philadelphia just secured 400,000 gallons of water per day. As we keep telling you, one little engagement spends like more than you would believe, or utilizes. That's enough to serve 400,000, 2,300 homes. While we're told to conserve every drop, big tech is buying up 40% of the town's excess capacity for $14 million. But you are the problem. Remember that. How insane. We will get into that more. The point, again, is that we're talking about this AI data center being driven, or the agenda being driven by more than ever Donald Trump's administration. By Lutnick, by Elon Musk, by the whole thing. They are rabid about this. Trying to, and in fact, many ways doing so, stopping states from being able to regulate their own process, which is unconstitutional. People are being arrested for speaking out against AI data centers. This is, I mean, we need to really start recognizing that it's not just one thing or the other. Whether it's left or right, by the way, same point. They don't care about what they want you to think they care about. It's only insofar as they use it insofar as to get you to think that they're on your side. These people don't care about whether it's woke ideology or climate change. Some of them absorb these things, but at the core point, guys, they're willing. Right now, you realize they were telling you that they were going to be fighting all this stuff, 2030, the Great Reset. And now you have Republicans speaking up and they're getting kicked out by Republicans. Wake up. Bill Mitchell, as we're talking about all of this, remember Rubio was called a rhino. The MAGA team hated him and said, that's not even possible. He won't be the guy. And then he became the guy and they said, oh, he's great. J.D. Vance, same point. Both of those men sitting there said Trump was a moron, said he was a loser, said he was terrible, said he was stupid. All of it's out there. Rubio hates the guy. It's been going on forever. Vance actually, right before this all happened and Peter Thiel handpicked him for the vice presidency, he was calling Trump an idiot. So he says, bookmark this. I'm predicting that J.D. Vance will be president for 8 years. And then Marco Rubio, president for 8 years after that. We may never have a Democrat president in this nation again. Oh, great. Those two forever. Think about that. For 16 years, he's predicting that we're going to have just extension of the Trump administration, right, like it is right now, which would exactly line up with what I think is happening in the world. And these are the people, most MAGA people don't like those guys, at least as it was before we got the team sport politics overtaking the whole conversation. So keeping all this in mind, here's what Trump's administration is part of. Now, let's not forget, back in 2020, Derek wrote this article called The Vaccine Bait and Switch. As millions pulled from WHO, Trump gives billions to Gates-founded GAVI. Now, as we pointed out at the time, and even it was briefly covered on Children's Health Defense before I think it basically got called out, even though it was true, and they pulled it back because they didn't think it was. We went over all this at the time. It's very real. And the whole point was that at the end of the day, it was shown very clearly that he moved money away, and all of his supporters were like, we told you, he's fighting the WHO and all the rest of the global stuff. Okay. And then gave money to GAVI, which was on the record. And GAVI was giving far more than that to WHO. So you could see how this ultimately just changed hands. And all he did was put the money into Bill Gates' GAVI hands, which then went right back to WHO and ultimately ended up being more than it would have been in the first place. That is a Standard Oil analogy, right? You're breaking it up. No, you're not. You're just breaking it up, but giving them more power, which is what breaking it up was meant to do in the first place. Stop that power. This is a manipulation. Now, this is 2020. Now, since people see this and we saw this administration coming back around, people were like, are they going to do it again? But my opinion, it had to be a different style because people are paying attention. So here we are. This person is johnfleetwood.com on Substack. Congress bypasses Kennedy's withdrawal from Bill Gates' GAVI vaccine cartel with new bill, funding through State Department. You think that's by accident? Here's the bill itself, H.R. 7006, Financial Services and General Government and National Security Department of State and Related Programs, Appropriations Act 2026. So this came out on the 15th, last month. So the House of Representatives last month, and again, Republican dominated, or majority rather, last month passed a sweeping federal spending bill that makes $3.5 billion available for pandemic-related purposes under the authority of the State Department, granting the agency broad discretion to fund pandemic response and global health security programs overseas. I mean, just the idea that they're funding pandemic response with what they've been saying, I find interesting. Now, not everybody is of the mind that these things are all inherently bad, but mostly Republicans, I argue, were promised very different things. I think that's very relevant. So what we're going to show here, let me type this out real quick, is ultimately that this is something that is going to continue, not just through GAVI, but the larger agenda, which I think most of you already know because you watch this show and others that are being honest about this, but one second. So continuing, the bill also makes the funds available to Bill Gates' vaccine cartel, GAVI, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, despite HHS's Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. withdrawing American funding from GAVI in June of last year. Remember, they didn't stop the mRNA direction as much as the narrative became that. I'm like, for the 100th time, I can prove to you whether it's showing you Comirnaty shot from 2025 and 2026 that is right now being used and is mRNA, or the others that are also currently being worked on that are also mRNA, or the reality of his own statement that said they weren't going to end it all. It's just weird how clearly it said that and people just went like, it's ending, because that was a narrative control discussion. But GAVI was only one part of this. By routing pandemic eligible funding through the State Department rather than HHS, Congress appears to be preserving and potentially restoring U.S. support for GAVI through a foreign policy funding channel, effectively bypassing the prior withdrawal ordered by Secretary Kennedy. Maybe that was the whole design. Or maybe Kennedy actually wants to stop this and he's been fighting through the administration. You can decide. Either way, it needs to represent the entirety of the Trump direction. The new legislation, H.R. 7006, formally tied to the Financial Services and General Government and National Security Department of State and Related Programs Appropriation Act 2026, was approved by the House on January 14th by 341 to 79 vote, and has since been received in the Senate, clearing a major procedural hurdle toward becoming law. Now, I get the sense it's going to pass the same way in the Senate. I hope not. The truth, though, is that this is something that, I mean, I think especially when you see the full government agenda, most of what's in this seems to be in line with what they all stand with. But what I'm going to show you are things that most Republicans would say no to, but I'll show you most of them voting yes on it. You can see which representatives vote yes. I'll show you that in a second. Buried within the bill's State Department and Foreign Operations section is a $3,531,975,000 appropriation for global health programs. $3.5 billion, a funding account that the bill explicitly states shall be made available for pandemics and other infectious disease outbreaks, along with global health security initiatives. While the bill does not earmark a fixed dollar amount exclusively for pandemics, the statutory language authorizes the entire $3.5 billion pool to be used for pandemic purposes at the State Department's discretion, without setting up a cap or requiring further congressional approval. So all you did was make this way, way worse. There's no, I mean, not like they cared about Congress anyway, but now you literally don't even need to pretend that matters. And there's no cap, no congressional approval. And we're talking about the State Department. You're talking about the Department of War overlap here, guys. This is about not that I think HHS was some altruistic institution, But it's quite a bit different than the State Department. We're talking about clandestine operations here. The weirdness of that being through them, or rather, to be more accurate, the appropriate connection. That this is what it's always been about. And it's sort of like the USAID closing and just being absorbed in the State Department. It didn't close. They just showed you what was always happening. It's an operation. So is this. That's what I read it as anyway. Now it says HR 7006 was introduced on January 12th by Representative Tom Cole, Republican, advanced through the House Appropriations and Budget Committees and passed after multiple floor debates and recorded votes. Bill's now pending Senate consideration. And just to show you right now, this is something that was literally posted publicly as being supported by the direct executive branch. The administration supports HR 7006. Okay, this is executive office of the president, directly from the United States government of the executive branch, or rather the executive branch of the United States government. So that's really important for where this goes. So let's go through this. Introduced 112, the bill provides fiscal year 2026 appropriations to several federal departments and agencies for activities and programs related to financial services, general government, national security, administration of foreign affairs, and foreign assistance. I mean, the idea of foreign assistance in general seems to be America first is what we keep being told. Now, foreign assistance is something that every part of our government stresses, even though it seems to be something that most Republicans don't even acknowledge is happening. Whether Israel, the Ukraine, or anything else. Far more than that. It's going to Africa. It's going all around the world. But how is that America first? Now, maybe you agree. Maybe you think it's supposed to be happening. My argument is not even about should or should not. It's about whether or not this applies or fits in with the agenda that's being stated by this government. Now, here, just to show you again, this was, we already read it, but just on the actual actions, has been received in the Senate as the 15th, and it's ongoing right now. Now, actually, now that I think about it, I could have found the Senate version and maybe seen if there's any more movement on that, but we'll follow up on that tomorrow if there is. So here's the actual bill. Let's go through some of this. There's quite a bit in here, a lot. In fact, it might stand out even more. Like some of these, it's a huge spending bill. But what I want to cut to is specifically the point he's making, and then the larger point of a few things that I just happen to find that I think stand out. It's right down here. So, the bilateral economic assistance funds appropriated to the president under global health programs. This that basically says, provided that this, how these things always read, it starts by saying, for necessary expenses to carry out provisions, and list the $3.5 billion to remain available until 2027. Now it says, state provided that this amount shall be made available for training, equipment, and technical assistance to build the capacity of public health institutions and organizations in developing countries. Right out of the gate, we're talking about building pandemic public health institutions in foreign. I mean, why is that even something we would even discuss funding right now? And for such activities as child survival and maternal health programs, immunization and oral rehydration programs, other health, nutrition, water, and sanitation programs, which directly address the needs of mothers and children and related education programs all around the world, assistance for children displaced or orphaned by causes other than AIDS, programs for the prevention, treatment, and control of and research of HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis, polio, malaria, and other infectious diseases, including neglected tropical diseases. Oh, good. Let's go on a limb. Let's go look at the ones that nobody's talking about. And for assistance to communities several severely affected by HIV and AIDS, including children infected or affected by AIDS. So right there, before we even get in the next part. So that's, again, not about, maybe you believe that's what we should be doing. That's for you to decide. It's not my point. This is not what the Republicans are claiming that their government are trying to accomplish. This is not just Republicans. This is a bigger bill, but this has been predominantly supported, or has been supported by the majority of Republicans and clearly by the White House. So if you believe Trump is trying to fight all these things in regard to what Democrats were doing, explain to me why the same things are happening. Number 6, disaster preparedness training for health crises. Right there. Number 7, programs to prevent, prepare for, and respond to unanticipated and emerging global health threats, including zoonotic diseases and family planning, reproductive health. Provided further that funds appropriated under this paragraph may be made available for the United States contributions to the GAVI Alliance and to multilateral vaccine development partnerships to support epidemic preparedness. That is everything Republicans were calling out in a broad sense. In particular, the GAVI alliance. This is just blatantly stated as making sure that this money can flow to the GAVI alliance at their discretion, and this is openly supported by the current Trump administration. I find that to be insane based on what we know. In fact, when I shouldn't say insane, I find it should be insane for people that believe what he tells you. If you pay attention, this is exactly what I would have expected. They don't believe what they always try to pretend they believe. In addition, for necessary expenses to carry out the provisions of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 for the prevention, treatment, and control of and research of HIV and AIDS, another $5 billion, 5.8 in fact, to remain available until 2030, which shall be appointed directly to the Department of State. Well, gee, I wonder if that money might just end up in the hands of Israel or something like that. Seeing as how there's all this weird things moving around. Well, I jump ahead. We'll get to the point where it lists Israel 38 times in this bill. United States contribution to the global fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, global fund, huh? Why would a group claiming to fight globalism and all this different conversation, and in fact, push back against finding any of these things, suddenly put forward $1.2 billion to the global fund to fight AIDS? I mean, it's contradictory to what we're being told. International humanitarian assistance. Now, to make my point clear, I've said this before. There's plenty of examples like this that I might argue, if is possible and individuals want to do so, would be important for individuals to do. I'm not of the mind that government should be involved with charity at all. In fact, I think that's what becomes a business and makes it a problem. But aside from that, in regard to these, the HIV and whatever else, the point is not, like I said, about whether that ultimately it's individuals want to support or help people around the world. That's always been the case. But what this becomes is an industry that's used to manipulate you, and money flows through this. And in historic examples like India or other places, it ends up being the opposite, whether it's with GMOs or AIDS treatment or polio vaccines from Bill Gates. It hurts them. They're tested on. They're manipulated. And this is under humanitarian assistance, for necessary expenses to enable the Secretary of State to carry out the provisions of Section 491 of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 for international disaster relief, rehabilitation, reconstruction assistance. Didn't we just talk about this? Now you're talking about rebuilding other places in the world if they have disasters, like Israel, for example. Now it says, and the Migration of Refugee Assistance Act. Activities to meet refugee and migration needs. Okay, here we are, talking about Minnesota and, the fraud of refugees, and Massey making this point before, saying, look, right here in this bill, they allowed, as a previous bill, they allowed money to flow to the same program where fraud is happening in Minnesota. I mean, how can you not see that? That was the same people that were screaming about stopping the fraud. So on top of that, not again to say that this shouldn't be happening, you can decide whether you think it should or not. It says, activities to meet refugee and migration needs, salaries, expenses of personal and dependents as authorized by the Foreign Service Act of 1980, allowances as authorized by sections 5921 through 5925 of 505 United States Code, purchase and hire of passenger motor vehicles and services as authorized by section 309 of 505. $5 billion, $400 million, $5.4 billion to remain available until expended, of which not less than 6.5 million shall be available to refugees resettling in Israel. So on top of the general point of $5.4 billion to be given to people resettling in refugee positions, they're talking about 6.5 million specifically for Israelis resettling in Israel. Or rather specifically, refugees resettling in Israel, meaning anybody that they want to claim is, somewhat connected to Jewish religion they want to bring into Israel and displace Palestinians. United States Emergency Refugee and Migration Assistance Fund. For necessary expenses to carry out the provisions of Section 2C of the Migration Refugee Assistance Act, $100 million to remain available, provided that amounts be made available by this act that are in excess of limitation contained in paragraph 2. Oh, son of a gun. Well, I just lost that. Sorry, guys. I hit back on that thing on accident and I lost it. But, I have this here. So I'm glad I did that, actually. The point was about after this, just searching for the term. So I believe we had this here. Yeah, I was almost done anyway. So this is where I was. Simple point saying the amount that made available. So it's $100 million for international humanitarian assistance for specifically Migration and Refugee Assistance Act. This is exactly what you guys were all calling out. So if you believe this shouldn't be happening, then why is the Trump administration supporting a bill that allows that to happen? Democracy Fund. For necessary expenses to carry out the provisions of the Foreign Assistance Act 1961, says for the promotion of democracy globally. Sure sounds like exactly what we were fighting under Democrats, doesn't it? Including to carry out the purposes of Section 502, $205 million to remain available until 2027, which shall be made available for human rights and democracy funds of the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, Department of State. Always funny how Department of State's included, which means it could go towards anything other than that too. That funds appropriated under this heading that are made available to the National Endowment for Democracy. You know, basically USAID in other form. It is another regime change engine. So all those things are crazy to me. Now, on top of that, though, just back to this one. Check this out. So this is a bill for 2026 about U.S. government spending, right? So explain for me why Israel is listed 35 times in this bill. 35 times. Now you realize there could be a section for Israel, right? No. This is the entirety of the bill peppered with things about Israel. The Israeli Arab Scholarship Program that the U.S. government wants to spend millions of dollars on. Why? Why is that your responsibility as an American? Or 4.5, oh, that's one we just read about refugees resettling in Israel. This one, anti-terrorism, demanding related programs. Damn it, this was frustrating. I had all this highlighted. I just didn't caption it because I could search using the word Israel, but then I refreshed the page. So I don't know what I'm reading for, but the simple point, I'm just going to go through it quickly, is that Israel is listed in this for, this one's $870 million, specifically for anti-terrorism and programs that relate directly to Israel and programs that relate to, calling out Palestinians. None of the funds appropriated or otherwise made available by this act may be used to move the United States Embassy to the state of Israel. Oh, let me read it again since I'm making it sound confusing. None of the funds appropriated. So millions of dollars up here for something. None of the funds appropriated or otherwise made available by this act may be used to move the United States Embassy to the state of Israel to a location other than Jerusalem. So you have the government of the United States, largely Trump's administration, clearly being driven by Israel to say, to understand this, you're not allowed to give this money up here that has to do with the diplomatic facilities to anything involved with moving the U.S. Embassy to Israel anywhere other than Jerusalem. So basically, they're using this to say, no matter what, it has to go to Jerusalem, which is it's a contentious point. It's a small thing, but the point is that they're folding into this bill about American U.S. government funding that you have to make sure that stays in Jerusalem or moves there, otherwise it won't be funded. It's a manipulative point that might affect Americans because Israel wants what it wants. This one, the Chapter 5 and Title 1 of the Emergency Wartime Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2023 is amended under the heading Loan Guarantees to Israel, meaning that the Emergency Wartime Supplemental Appropriations Act included loan guarantees to Israel. And this is part of what Gen X Girl discusses in the article she put out for TLAV, how American tax dollars prop up Israel's zombie economy. You ever read this? It will blow your mind. There is very clear illegality here, where you have the U.S. government allowing Israel to basically rob Americans. You've got corporations and industry and people in government, by the way, using this situation, which in fact breaks the law, where they're forcing you to buy their bonds, even though they know that they're losing money. They have a fiduciary responsibility to make money for the people investing. And yet they know they're doing this because they want to support Israel. And they're rapidly losing money. I mean, it's just over the top, guys. And your government is allowing this. Your government is allowing you to inadvertently supplement the Israeli agenda. Commercial leasing, defense articles, notwithstanding any other provision of law, it says, of the Arms Export Control Act may be used to provide financing to Israel and Egypt and NATO other countries but specifically list Israel. And that comes back to millions of dollars up here. These are all different spots. Palestinian statehood. It says, none of the funds appropriated in this title an act may be provided to support a Palestinian state unless the Secretary of State determines that the governing entity of Palestinian state has demonstrated a firm commitment to peaceful coexistence with the state of Israel. I mean, think about writing that into a bill that you're saying we won't allow this in general unless what? I guess what, the Palestinians at large, Hamas, the Palestinian Authority? Like, they create a situation where you can always argue that's not what they think until they've demonstrated a commitment to peaceful coexistence. You mean aside from Israel murdering them every day? It's these points, it just goes through this nonstop. Why is this in the U.S. government bill? Now, some of this does have to do with foreign spending, but that's the whole point in general. Why is that happening at all? But it goes on and on and on. I mean, there are all these different things about Israel having what they want. You can't spend here unless Israel gets what it needs. The president exercises the waiver of authority. What was this one? And the Palestinian Authority is acting to counter incitement of violence against Israelis. Like, so basically saying that until they do this to protect Israelis, that this money won't go where it needs to go. And so the whole thing is riddled with this stuff. Meeting the obligations of the peace treaty. Which one was that one? Sorry, these were all highlighted before. I'm trying to jump through it quickly. $3 billion available for grants only for Israel. That's what it says. Of the funds appropriated to the act, not less than $3.3 billion available for Israel. And by the way, that's on top of everything else we're dealing with, guys. They have a memorandum of understanding for $3.8 billion a year. This just is more on top of more on top of more. Anyway, I'll leave it there since I don't. It's just, guys, it should blow your mind. That's 22. There's 35 different references to Israel in this bill. Oh, here was the voting. Of course, I closed that and I lost the highlighting. But the point was here, 188 Republicans. People like Jim Jordan voted yes. Nancy Mace. Oh, wait. Yeah, she voted nay. I'm glad I checked. I didn't want to misreport that. But there was somebody else too. It was Stefanik, of course, voted yes. These are the Republicans are all over this thing. 188 of them voted yes. I just think that stands out, guys. And again, the White House stated very clearly they support H.R. 7006. That means they support the funding to Israel. They support the funding for refugees. They support the funding for immigrants in this country. They support the funding for GAVI. That's what that means. Now, on the point of the overlap to vaccines, one example that stands out to me that I think is relevant, one called Centivax, because we've talked about the universal flu vaccine that goes back to Trump's first administration and well before. Fauci, the whole thing. So this is just the guy, I think Orwell said this to me, it's mentioned as a good thing. You know, remember all those variants and how crazy it was? If that's even what happened. Well, check it out. We have this new thing that smashes the mutations. Okay. Well, here's the article. This is from February 12th, 2026. Centivax is what it's called. Doses first participants in the universal flu vaccine. Well, first off, the company reports that more than $26 million in non-dilutive funding from organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who's very close to Trump, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness, that's CEPI, very close to Bill Gates, funds him directly. The National Institutes of Health. Oh, that's the U.S. government. Oh, the United States Department of Agriculture. That's also the U.S. government. The Military Infectious Diseases Research Program, the U.S. Naval Medical Research Command, and the Department of Defense. Oh, great. So the U.S. government directly supports this shot. Okay, let's keep going. Centivax initiative, and just to be clear, this is 2026. This is already happening. It's already being tested. Just to make this is another post, adds to it. Same point, really. 26 million. Bill Gates, CEPI, NIH, U.S. government. Okay. Here's Bill Gates directly connected to the Centivax Universal Fund, the funding of it anyway. The Gates Foundation, which is not the same as saying Bill Gates, but it does, the connection's there. Same point. Here, CEPI and GAVI have a direct connection. They work together, right? That's been going on for a while. Centivax secures $45 million back in 2025, specifically for this mRNA shot, which is not really being regarded as such when you get into the meat of it. But I think it's interesting that they don't want that to be discussed, but that's what this is. Centivax has discussed or successfully raised $45 million first on their experimental universal mRNA flu vaccine. So if you right now look at the conversation, it seems like they're very willfully not mentioning mRNA, and I think we know why. Centevax vaccine incorporates 22 different mRNA molecules encoding proteins from diverse flu strains. Great, so you get 22 different bad reactions. Fantastic. So here, going back to 2025, is Donald Trump's administration saying HHS, NIH, both of which support this, launch next generation universal vaccine platform for flu. Now, they don't make this about an mRNA. Very well could be something totally disconnected. I'm not saying these are the same program, but I think the point first is to recognize that these are the same agenda. And then if we recognize that they're the same agenda, and we can recognize that Bill Gates has been in the ear of Trump, they've met, 5 times since he's been this administration? Here he is going, Bill Gates has dinner with Trump, left impressed by what Trump had to say. And the point here is that, okay, you can prove quite literally that Trump is Gates has been discussing vaccine with Trump since last administration. I mean, that's very clear. Trump's super interested in the universal flu vaccine. What does that mean? That's 2028. Bill Gates is donating $12 million to help develop a universal flu vaccine. That's back in 2018 as well. Trump opens the gates to universal flu vaccine. 2019. Here's one in 2018 as well. Bill Gates got President Trump fired up about the universal flu vaccine. Maybe got a job offer. And we know that Trump's administration in 2025 has leaned into the self-amplifying shots, which we've shown here, which are happening, which is what Gates was basically pushing. So coming back to this before we keep going forward, if we know that Gates is close on this and is in his ear about this, let's make sure we're clear on this, right? So this is just a financial connection. You could argue that there's nothing there, that it just is, the connection's there, but that's just coincidence. Certainly possible. My thought here is that you can see these overlapping connections, the GAVI. So let's start with the bill, right? You got a bill that comes out and it is clearly stating that the money will go to GAVI from the Trump administration or from the U.S. government. So GAVI gets that money, but GAVI is not connected to this shot, right? Except GAVI has a partnership with CEPI. And Bill Gates is directly working with CEPI and funding them. And Bill Gates is directly connected to this shot. And on top of that, the shot itself is clearly funded and supported by the Department of Defense and the U.S. government. But the point to be made is that that funding started before Trump's administration, but they haven't stopped it. All of this matters. And so 2 things I'm showing you is that the shot does continue and is supported by the government because they could stop this. The same with the rest of them. And RFK Jr. yanked all that back in mid. Okay. You can show that they support the shot. They support the vaccine direction. They support all of this. And that you can show that the GAVI direction, where they're funding it, directly continues funding the mRNA, CEPI, Bill Gates direction. Now, you could even argue that they're too dumb to realize that's happening. I find that hard to believe. It's important to recognize, I think, that this is not just an overlapping coincidence, but rather a shell game of funding to make sure that we don't put these things together. You can decide for yourself. Here's Bill Gates speaking about his dinner with Trump.
You met with Donald Trump since the election?
Yeah, I had a chance to go have a long and actually quite intriguing dinner with him.
What did you discuss? What was intriguing?
Well, we touched on a lot of things. It was over 3 hours. To my surprise, it was, just he and I, his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, and the person who helps manage things for me, Larry Cohen. So the 4 of us sat there, and it was quite wide-ranging. Global health's the area that I work in, and such amazing things have happened and can happen there. I spoke a lot about HIV and that the foundation's literally working on a cure for that. We're at an early stage, and so he, in the COVID days, accelerated the vaccine innovation. So I was asking him if maybe the same kind of thing could be done here, and we both got, I think, pretty excited about that. We talked about polio, where we're very close to getting that done, but if you stop, it'll spread back. And so I explained why it's been tough in Pakistan, Afghanistan. We've had cases show up in Gaza. We have cases in Africa, and he was fascinated to hear what he could do to maximize the chance that during the next 4 years that incredible milestone will be achieved. I felt like he was energized and looking forward to helping to drive innovation. I was frankly impressed with how well he showed a lot of interest in the issues I brought up.
Now, you could still argue that he made that up, whatever. It's question everything. But I think actions speak louder, as always. And here we are. After that, by the way, Trump admin leans into the self-amplifying shots, as I've shown you many times. One of the examples that he mentions by name, Arcturus, I show this one because it's important that it's COVID-19 shot, which should alarm people that when they tell you they're stopping this, and specifically mRNA, and even more than that, specifically self-amplifying. That's still going on. That's out there now. So too is the Comirnaty shot. That's also mRNA. And I argue the same when you understand the history of this shot as self-amplifying, but that's for you to decide. Either way, the point is 2026. COVID-19 shot right now. That's out there. That's being given. The Trump administration. Trump just said again that he thinks this is the most successful thing ever. I don't know how we can't be honest about this. Now, on top of that, to bring it around even more, Centivax has 2 different contracts with the Department of Health and Human Services. One for a snake-vax venom for $3 million that goes through 2026, as well as another one around an avian flu vaccine to 2028, both of which are funded by this current administration. And I mean, like, as of 2026. So now some of you might not, be of the mind that every vaccine is bad or whatever, but realize his core, his base, were very adamant about that. RFK Jr. leading a pretty strong campaign to not get rid of every vaccine, but to reevaluate like the entire core system of all of them. And that's not what they're doing. They said gold standard, and then they put out plenty of them that didn't even use a placebo. Like, I don't know if he's just being played or he's lying or what we're looking at, guys, but we got to be honest about all this. Now, last point that I think just even more so demonstrates what this administration, or all of our government really, but right now for those that need to see it, that this administration is playing everybody. Robert Kadlec, the man behind Trump's biowarfare policy. Now, there's a few things I'll get into, but this is a very long article and it is worth your time. And I'll include the one that Whitney wrote for TLAV back in the COVID-19 timeframe. But the subtitle is Robert Kadlec, who, remember, was the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response during Trump's first administration, which gave him control over the nuclear stockpile and all kinds of stuff. A veteran of biowarfare with longstanding connections to the national security state and corrupt government contractors, as well as controversial COVID-19 policies, has now become the head of counterproliferation at the Department of War. Oh, for a group that's doing the opposite, that seems like an easy job. They're not like the idea of the non-proliferation treaty, the nuclear treaty. They're supposed to be rolling back their nuclear arsenal. They're not doing that. Trump's the one spearheading the tactical nukes. So I just think that's an interesting thing for him to step into when they're not doing that. But either way, maybe there's more to that than maybe I'm misunderstanding the counter-proliferation point. I believe that's what it means. But it says, Kadlec most recently served at the Department of Health and Human Services as its Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response in the first Trump administration, where he played a crucial role in developing early COVID-19 responses that clearly hurt a lot of people, guys, and policies, as well as conducting global pandemic simulations the year before COVID-19 crises. Yes, that's this guy, guys, in 2019, right? Event 201. These are the very people that you guys have always been calling out. He just got welcomed right back into the administration. These policies were sharply criticized by the man who is now head of HHS, RFK Jr. Amid the silence from Kennedy, which is deafening, and most other COVID-era critics regarding Kadlec, the seasoned government operative was finally confirmed for his Pentagon post by the Senate in December. His one-time critics aside, hardly any mainstream news outlets covered Kadlec's nomination or confirmation, despite his new role bearing significant importance. Why would that be? These people out here screaming bloody murder over positions where it's politically contentious, Kavanaugh, whatever else. Well, more so that, that's a judge example, but in many cases, the confirmations for Trump's administration, they were fighting tooth and nail. And this happens, and no one even, I don't even see anybody talk about this. Doesn't that seem strange? What it shows me is that this is the important stuff. They want you all batting at nothing over there at the cat toy they dangle in front of you. But this is what changes things. Or that's the way you could read it. This is despite not only his hand in early COVID policies, but his role in a simulation that eerily preceded and seemingly predicted the 2001 anthrax attacks, which figures very close to Kadlec, likely orchestrated in an effort to bioterrorize the American public into supporting military venturism abroad. Now, Kadlec, as the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, had some level of involvement in Event 201, but what she's referencing here is the anthrax discussion. And in fact, I'll jump really quickly to the larger series she did for TLAV, Engineering Contagion. One of them specifically, All Roads, it overlaps the whole series, but All Roads Lead to Dark Winter is about the anthrax lie and the manipulation of our government and what that led to, which overlapped with 9/11, and it just continues to this very day. These people are directly involved in all of this. And then it says, which figures very close to Cadleck likely orchestrated in an effort to bioterrorize the American public into supporting military adventurism abroad. I'm only just now realizing somebody's note they gave me about my microphone. Hopefully it's let me know if the microphone sounds any better when I just move it like that. Let me know. Now at the Pentagon, Cadleck, a crucial figure in cultivating the national security-based public health system, being built out right now, guys. That's part of the control grid. Will hold vast power over the nation's weapons of mass destruction policy, ranging from nuclear deterrence, developing capabilities to counter WMD threats, and interagency coordination and international engagement on countering weapons of mass destruction, policy and strategy as part of the Trump administration's efforts to reshape the way the DoD meets and responds to WMD threats. If Cadleck's record is any indication of how he will govern at this new post, then the U.S. will take a firm step towards the fulfillment of the neoconservative policy doctrine that came to rise during the Bush years. This doctrine envisions that the empowerment of the most secretive sects of the national security state, a permanent state of war and emergency, the financialization of catastrophe, and the consolidation of power. Well, sorry to say, guys, it looks like we're already there. Cadleck, often unnoticeable and out of sight, has long played a crucial role in the implementation of these goals for decades. And there's tons that you should read in here, guys. I'll include, on the way out, one show I did back in 2023 where Robert Cadleck was one of the people who spoke up and said vaccine research caused COVID. And now they're continuing vaccine research, and specifically mRNA, specifically self-amplifying. So it makes you wonder why that makes sense. But on top of that, the specific part of that series, and this is part 2 or part 3, the head of the Hydra, the rise of Robert Cadleck. Now, depending on what goes on the next day, tomorrow, we may get into this more in depth, because this, and I've gone through this in the past. It's very much worth your time to understand how this connects to a lot of different things. But the main point, guys, is that this is the last thing you would expect from a group that's trying to change things. Like, you want to talk about the deep state, whatever you think that is, looking it right in the face, guys. This is, and I don't mean that he is the deep state. My point is that that's the behind the scenes kind of never ending power. These people are not elected. That's what that really talks about. And they're, going back to the Epstein network point from Kamor Kalmasian, that we're right now seeing that there is another way that things actually function. What they want from you is to just get tired of the uncomfortable reality of that and just fall back into the comfortable suffocation of the government narrative. Don't do it. The truth can be uncomfortable as hell, guys, but it's still the truth. And I argue that it's my personal worldview is I would rather deal with that and understand what's going on than just be ignorant, blissfully ignorant about what's going on around me. That's just me, though. Because personally, I'd like to change those things for the better than ignore them and put my head in the sand. Thank you for tuning in today. Why not? Let's end with this. Since I said that before, we'll end with this clip here for you. It's a good clip. Stay tuned if you have a couple minutes. It's the truth about Zionism. And I actually do think it's actually very relevant to the larger point being made today, because this, in my opinion, is a central part of why all this is happening. Whether that's because of the Trump administration in particular, or because of the larger Zionist implications of all of it. But I'll leave you there today, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate your support. Genuinely, as always, we couldn't do this without you. There it is. All right. Thank you for tuning in, guys. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
We will move the American to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
No. I was with him until he said the eternal capital of the Jewish people. President Trump has the right to make whatever foreign policy he wants, and if he feels that Miami Beach is best to recognize as the capital of Israel, That's his business, he can do it. But once he starts talking about the Jewish people, now he's encroaching upon religion, and now that's my domain. There is absolutely no political relationship between the Jewish people and Jerusalem. It's merely a holy city. The Jewish people don't have a capital. We never had a capital. Countries have capitals. States have capitals. That's the definition of a capital. Capital, dictionary. Noun, the most important city or town of a country or region. Now, the Jewish people are not a country or region. The Jewish people are a religious community. We pray towards Jerusalem, but we relate to Jerusalem only as a holy city, not as a political capital city of the Jewish people. And all of those overtures that we make to Jerusalem and the yearning that Jews have for Jerusalem is only as a holy city, not as a capital city. And because it's a holy city, it doesn't matter who has sovereignty over it. Jerusalem is just as holy and just as much Jerusalem, whether it's under the auspices of the Turks or the Romans or the British or whoever. It's important to know that the Zionists were the ones that started this business of the capital of the Jewish people, and it's an idea that conflicts directly with the teachings of Judaism. At Mount Sinai in the desert, the Torah says, the Bible says about us, Hayom hazeh niyeh la'am. That's when we became a people. The Jewish people aren't a people because of a land. We're not a people because of a language. We're not a people because of a culture. We're a religion, and when we were deputized into the religion, when we accepted the religion given to us by God, that's when we became the Jewish people. We had no land, no territories, we had no capital city. And in fact, our commentators say the reason why God gave the Jews the Torah in a desert before they went into the Holy Land was in order to teach them that land, country, has nothing to do with your Jewishness. Your Jewishness is because you accept the religion. A couple of years ago, the Pope went to visit Netanyahu, and Netanyahu's bragging to the Pope, this is where Jesus lived in this land, and he spoke Hebrew here. So the Pope corrected him. The Pope said, no, Aramaic. And Pope was right. Netanyahu says, yeah, but he understood Hebrew. Well, maybe he did, but Hebrew was never the national language of the Jewish people. It was a holy language, just like the land of Israel was a holy land. Oh, by the way, if you see the clip and you don't know which of the two people talking is Netanyahu and which is the Pope's the one wearing the yarmulke. Even if we were to pretend that the Jewish people have a capital, that would have nothing to do with whether Jerusalem should be the capital of Israel, because Israel's not the Jewish people. Israel has nothing to do with the old Jewish Commonwealth. It's a country that was created in 1948. When you hear the Israelis or the Zionists talk about how Jerusalem has a connection with the Jewish people for 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 4,000 years, it's all true, but that doesn't translate to, well, therefore Jerusalem has to be part of Israel. People think that Israel is some kind of continuation of the Jewish government, but it's not. It's a completely different form of government, completely different values, completely different ideology, and completely different people. These are not religious Jews that are running the country. These are atheists. And yet, the Israeli prime ministers from Ben-Gurion all the way up to Netanyahu use the Bible as an excuse for ownership of the land. Ben-Gurion, he says the mandate is not our Bible, but the Bible is our mandate. This is a man that didn't believe the Bible was given by God. He didn't believe God ever spoke to prophets. He didn't believe it at all. Neither does Benjamin Netanyahu. It says in the Bible, watch the Sabbath to keep it holy. Netanyahu doesn't refrain from work on the Sabbath. It says not to eat non-kosher food in the Bible. Does Netanyahu do that? No. There is nothing holy in the Bible that Netanyahu cares about. The only thing he cares about is his land. Restorationist Protestants, we call them evangelical Christians today, they existed hundreds of years before any Jewish Zionist was ever born. And because the evangelicals, the restorationists, had great influence in Britain, and Britain had the mandate, the Zionists very, very much adopted the Christian evangelical interpretation of the Bible, and that's what they use today. You'll find that Benjamin Netanyahu sometimes even espouses Christian evangelical interpretations of the Bible over the Jewish ones. A number of years ago, Netanyahu spoke at the site of the Auschwitz concentration camp, and he mentioned a prophecy in the book of Yecheskel about how the prophets saw dry bones rising from the ground and growing flesh and becoming live again. And Netanyahu said that that prophecy is fulfilled with the state of Israel, because the Jews were dried bones and now they grew flesh and they're real people again. This interpretation is not found anywhere in any Jewish source, because in Judaism, this is impossible. But for over a century, this has been a Christian evangelical interpretation. The Zionists, when they talk about the Bible, they're not talking about the Judaic version of Judaism and Jewishness. They're talking really about the Christian evangelical version. Netanyahu has no right to claim that his state is mine. I was born in America. My father was born in Poland. My mother's family's from England. We have nothing to do with Israel. We're Jews. We're observant Jews. We're religious Jews. I wear a yarmulke. Netanyahu doesn't. I keep the Shabbos. Netanyahu doesn't. And Israel is not my nation state in the slightest. This is a unilateral claim of the Israelis, of the Zionists, and it's an assault on my religion. So too, the claim that Jerusalem is the capital of the Jewish people because it transforms the Jewish people from a religious identity to a national identity, to a political identity. And it's an assault on my religion when Netanyahu says that because Jerusalem is so connected to the Jewish people, therefore it must be part of the state of Israel. Jerusalem's holiness, Jerusalem's value to the Jewish people has nothing to do with who owns it, and it certainly has no reason to be part of the state of Israel.